Hello everyone, welcome to my fall 2025 eclipse season webinar. I'm Candace of Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology, and I'm so excited to be here with you guys today to talk about what is coming up on the eclipses in September of 2025. Once again, thank you guys for supporting my work. Let's go ahead and get into the topics for today's webinar. Now, obviously, we're going to be talking about both eclipses. They're taking place September of 2025. We are going to be talking about the lunar eclipse in Pisces first, followed by the solar eclipse taking place in Virgo, giving you guys all of the insight on the spiritual shifts, predictions that I have for these eclipses, and giving you guys some guidance. Now, I'll be doing an overview of the meanings of these particular eclipses, especially pertaining to the Virgo-Pisces axis. These eclipses are going to be taking place on September 7th. That'll be at 15 degrees of Pisces for the lunar eclipse, and September 21st, that'll be the solar eclipse at 29 degrees of Virgo. Now, I'm going to talk to you guys about the Saros cycles and what has happened with these cycles in the past, giving you some insight to the effects globally and collectively. I'm also going to give you guys some ritual recommendations for the two eclipses. And we're going to kind of finish up by talking about the advice for the 12 rising signs along with a tarot reading. And we're going to talk about why there is so much change going on over the next month. Obviously, we know that eclipse season ushers in major endings and beginnings happening every 6 months, and why this is really tied to karmic points involving the North Node in Pisces, which is encouraging us to tap into our intuition as well as surrender, and the South Node in Virgo, which is about releasing outdated habits, being a perfectionist, health and job changes as well. And I will be your host today. My name is Candace O'Neill, and I'm going to be giving you guys all of the astrological insight. So there's a lot to unpack. Grab your chart, or pull out your astro software, some pens, maybe take some notes. Obviously, you guys got this webinar so you can come back to it and you can listen to it throughout the next month as well. And you're really going to want to be paying attention to if you have any particular planets around these degrees. So if you are a Virgo sun, moon, or rising, especially around 28, 29 degrees, this is really going to be specific for you guys. As well as, I would say, the 0 to 1 degrees of the cardinal signs. So that'll be obviously Aries, Cancer, Libra, as well as Capricorn. And the Pisces placement, so if you have anything around, I would say, 13 to about 17 degrees of Pisces, sun, moon, or rising, as well as those degrees for the mutable signs, you're going to be filling the squares. So this is where it really pays to know your chart. So take note of those degrees. We'll get into all of the details as we kind of go through the presentation today. Now, I guess you guys are wondering, what is eclipse season? To some extent, these are a part of eclipses that have actually been playing out since the fall of 2024, when we saw the very first North Node Pisces eclipse that took place last year. And then again in March, we saw a Virgo lunar eclipse in 2025. So we're already kind of familiar with some of these eclipses. So some of you guys are going to see reoccurring themes or kind of continuations of stuff that you've already been building on. But essentially, eclipses are portals of change. So we see eclipse season happening twice a year. They're 6 months apart, and this is always when the sun, the moon, and earth are aligning near the lunar nodes, so the north and the south node. Now, September 2025 kicks off with a lunar eclipse full moon on the 7th, and then it's going to be ending with a solar eclipse new moon, and this is actually the second new moon in Virgo. We had a earlier eclipse in Virgo that was at 0 degrees, so we get a double dose of it, but this one's going to be a solar eclipse at a critical degree, and this is like a 2-week portal of accelerated change. So you guys may be feeling this. If you're watching this late in August, early September, we can be feeling the effects of these eclipses way down the line, because some of these eclipses are still going to be kind of playing out 6 to as far as 18 months from now. Now, astrologically, eclipses are considered like cosmic resets. And what this does is it reveals hidden truths. It's also about ending old cycles and initiating new ones. And they amplify the node's theme. So kind of destiny versus release. Now, spiritually speaking, we see this as like portals of evolution. Great time to be doing shadow work and focusing on manifestation. But the energy is a bit of a wild card. It can feel a little chaotic. And I always recommend for my clients avoid making major decisions during the exact event. So believe it or not, during the lunar and the solar eclipse, big decisions like moving, major relationships changes, financial changes, relocations, anything connecting to job changes. Yes, we can see stuff coming up that's pushing us to kind of make these shifts. But ideally, we want to wait until some of the eclipse energy shakes out. So I'm personally not a fan of like being on an airplane during these eclipses or doing any major, medical treatments during these eclipses. Obviously, it can be, different depending on your particular chart. But I'm advising a lot of my clients because they are tied together and we need to see how they kind of shake out to wait until we're getting into later in September after the eclipse or early October to kind of decide where we're going to be moving forward. So obviously you guys know that it's going to be taking place in Pisces and Virgo, but we're going to talk about all the specific aspects with these eclipses and how there's like other planets and other signs that are kind of tied into this significant change. Now, the spiritual and astrological meaning of eclipses are actually very different. We're going to see very different themes. Not only do they represent different themes, but actually the impact when you look at the aspects of the two separate eclipses could not be any more polar opposite. So in a nutshell, lunar eclipses, and this is what we're going to see first in Pisces, is always about emotional culminations. Especially in this sign, it's about, much needed conclusions, completions, cycles ending, becoming aware of things. Pisces is mutable water, so it's going to be very much connected to, releasing something and realizing what we're phasing out. And I think with Saturn in Pisces, with Neptune going back to Pisces, we're going to see a double dose of that. So for many of us, it's going to feel like a supercharged full moon. And it's obviously tied to subconscious, intuition, and karmic closure. So it's so appropriate when you guys see some of the aspects, just how much it correlates with that. Now, the solar eclipse on the other end, which we will see later in September on the 21st in Virgo, is going to be like a new moon on steroids. So this is a perfect time for new beginnings or becoming aware of where we take action. We also see that this is a time of seeding intentions and there is some kind of fate that's shifting and it will feel like an intensified new moon. When we have solar eclipses, because the sun is involved, it's very much putting its focus on identity and purpose and external changes. But overall, eclipses, they speed up karma. They do force growth through unpredictability. It's kind of like a wild card. You never know what you're going to get during eclipse season. And spiritually, they do symbolize surrender, especially with the Pisces influence here, and alignment with your higher self. Now, like I said, I would be using the eclipses for reflection, not action, especially because both of the eclipses really highlight the Pisces energy, and you guys will see it when we get into the chart. And yes, the energy can feel intense. For some of us, kind of bringing on eclipse fatigue, so we can feel like there's like emotional highs and emotional lows, and I think there's going to be also a lot of things closing out during the lunar eclipse, which we then have to kind of figure out our way around and how to kind of problem solve and what we need to kind of cut loose during that 2 weeks in between before we seed some of those new intentions under the solar eclipse in Virgo, that particular new moon. Now, the themes of the Virgo-Pisces axis is what I want to kind of talk to you guys about already. So basically, since earlier this year, since I think it was like around January, we saw the North Node move into Pisces, and it will continue to go through Pisces clear till summer of 2026. And essentially, we're looking at, Virgo being the South Node, Pisces being the North Node. So when we think about Virgo, which is obviously an earth sign, it's mutable, which means it's changeable. This is like about an energy that's giving way to change before we meet other people through Libra. This is a sign that is associated with practicality, service, health, analysis, and everything kind of connected to our jobs, our pets, our schedule, our habits, But remember that the South Node is there. So this is really going to be, showing us that we can lead, but we need to watch out for overcriticism, for perfectionism, and also burnout, what we're overdoing or what we're kind of overly focused on. Versus, Pisces, which is mutable water, so it's still changeable, it's flexible, and it has that association with Neptune and Jupiter. So this is guiding us more towards the direction of spirituality, compassion, intuition, our dreams. But there's also risk of escapism, boundaries, dissolving, illusion, self-undoing, isolation, fear, victim mentality, and also mental, emotional health, and substance abuse and addiction is something that comes up a lot with this particular axis. Now, when we see the opposition between the two, particularly under the lunar eclipse, it's really going to be highlighting this axis. And it's going to kind of show us that we need to really focus on balancing things. I think it's fair to say you'll see this through the solar eclipse too, because of the oppositions, but balancing the details through Virgo with kind of big picture flow of Pisces, and really healing through integration. So, grounded spirituality or compassionate efficiency, using our intuition when it comes to navigating our daily routines and our health and habits is going to be a big theme. So in 2025, it's really amplifying the collective shifts towards empathy over judgment, and that's that South Node that's in Virgo. Now, the North Node in Pisces and the South Node in Virgo, we will see continue from 2025 into 2026. Next year, we're going to see the nodes of fate shift, and we're also going to see some new eclipses coming in the beginning of the year, I believe in February and March, which are going to be in Aquarius. But with the North Node in Pisces, I really feel like this has been about focusing collectively on our destiny. And in order to kind of reach our destiny, we have to pay attention to our intuition. Pisces is also a very creative sign. It can be about spiritual creativity, vision, film, music, intuitive abilities. Surrender is a huge theme, as well as universal love. So we're all being called really during this season to embrace the unknown, and also spiritual or religious practices are definitely a theme here. Now, with the South Node in Virgo, yes, we're releasing that overanalysis, control, right, self-criticism, and it's really about letting go of feeling like we need to fix everything or make everything perfect or get everything in order, and it's focusing on wholeness over perfection. So the impact with these eclipses is that it's activating the nodes directly. The lunar eclipse, obviously we're going to see very close to the North Node in Pisces. The solar eclipse is going to be very close to the South Node in Virgo, which will be accelerating personal evolution. That means collectively we're kind of shifting from material with the South Node in Virgo that can be more material and kind of like rational focus to things that are more empathic, they're more supernatural, spiritual, and also kind of having more of a focus on fluid living. In terms of visibility and the countries that are going to be affected by these particular eclipses, this is very interesting. So we've got the lunar eclipse here on the left side, where you guys see a majority of the red that's kind of going through parts of Asia and also parts of Europe. Pretty significant in terms of where it's going to be impacting with the visibility there. And then we have the solar eclipse, which is going to be on the right-hand side. That'll be the one in Virgo. That's also going to be impacting some areas, but it's going to be primarily actually connecting most to parts of like New Zealand, maybe Australia, and parts of Antarctica. So astrologers kind of believe that, eclipses in terms of the path and whether it's like going to be a total, solar or lunar eclipse, the impacts that that's going to have on that particular country or region. So I'll give you guys the whole rundown of the list of where this is potentially going to be impacting places. But I can tell you in terms of like visibility, the lunar eclipse that we're going to be seeing taking place in Pisces on the September 7th date is going to be a total blood moon lunar eclipse. And this is going to be predominantly visible in Europe, Africa, and Asia, as well as Australia. And it looks like it's going to be in totality for about 1 hour and 22 minutes. And the moon will turn red from Earth's shadow. Versus the solar eclipse, which you're going to see on the right-hand side, which will be on September 21st in Virgo, that's going to be taking place It'll be a partial eclipse. It'll be visible in parts of the Pacific, but primarily New Zealand, maybe parts of Australia. And it looks like it's going to have max of 85% coverage. So that's where we're going to be seeing the eclipses kind of impacting the most. Now, if we go to the next page, how this is going to be impacting these particular places, it really depends. We have to take into consideration, obviously, the country's chart. We have to take into consideration the aspects, but just generally, the countries that are going to be impacted by the lunar eclipse in Pisces, the total lunar eclipse obviously is going to be, impacting and kind of affecting the areas where it's going to be seen. And it'll be amplifying those Pisces themes of emotions and spirituality in some of like the local events. So for the visibility in Europe, there should be full visibility in the UK, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and Russia, which I do think might manifest as possible, emotional public revelations or spiritual movements. So there can be connections to religion, there could be connections to immigration, there could be connections also to what's going on with the church, as well as, Saturn is in Pisces, so themes revolving around leadership. And then in Africa, particularly in South Africa, Nigeria, Egypt, and Morocco, we could see that this could bring about heightened compassion waves and potential water-related issues. So issues with flooding and the ocean is a pretty common theme when we see eclipses in Pisces. So that can be some emphasis with like torrential rain or major changes going on with their weather. And then for Asia, we're going to have China, India, Japan, Indonesia, and parts of the Middle East like Saudi Arabia and Turkey, which may be experiencing leadership shifts and philosophical debates. And then Australia, obviously it should be full in Australia and parts of the Pacific, can bring about collective healing, environmental awakenings, but I do think that there can be more isolation going on in some of these areas as well. And then it can be partial in part of the Americas, like Eastern United States and Brazil. It'll be more mild, but you can still see some kind of impacts connecting to, global events. And obviously eclipses, that have connections to Pisces and Virgo countries. So if they have like a sun, moon, or rising in these particular degrees or signs, we can see that there can be some impact. So like, India has a Pisces rising, I believe, so they could be feeling like the major karmic effects and karmic pulls. But you'd have to look at the specific country and keep in mind that this can take about anywhere from a few weeks to about 12 months to see the full manifestation of some of these themes. Now, if we do the overview for the lunar eclipse that's taking place on the 7th of September in Pisces, you guys know me, I always talk about the aspects that are going on at the time of the new or full moon, and they're going to kind of dictate and determine how things are going to go. So eclipse season in September starts off sweet, and then there's a bit of a twist, and then we start to actually have to face the harsh realities and some of the limitations and some of the separations that will come from the solar eclipse in Virgo. So arguably, I think that the lunar eclipse in Pisces is probably the best eclipse all year. I mean, obviously there's only 4 of them, but the ones that we had in the springtime were not that easy. We saw obviously a lunar eclipse in Virgo, which involved the South Node. We also saw a solar eclipse in Aries that was wrapping up the eclipses in the axis of Aries and Libra that we had the last couple of years. But this one I think is the best. And like I said, it'll be a total lunar eclipse at 15 degrees of Pisces. Now, lunar eclipses are full moons. So we always see an opposition between the sun in one sign and the moon in another sign. And that's where it's really showing the axis of these two. And obviously, Pisces is traditionally ruled by Jupiter. So what I really like is that we have Jupiter at 19 degrees of Cancer. It is going to be conjunct Castor. I'll talk about what that means. But Jupiter is one of the great benefics, right, next to Venus. It is exalted in Cancer, which means it could do its best work. There's the most emotional, intuitive home and family and healing growth that's possible. And we see mutual reception between Jupiter in a lunar sign and the moon in a Jupiterian sign, and they're in a trine, okay? So this is actually pretty positive from my perspective. For some people, it's going to be very emotional. It's going to represent kind of closing things out and the kind of emotional and kind of therapeutic healing that comes from that. Obviously, getting in touch with our roots, getting in touch with our homes, our family, and faith revolving around what what positive things can come as long as we're kind of closing out old cycles. Now, the key aspects that really kind of catch my eye is that trine. So where we see Jupiter in Cancer trining the eclipse, it brings emotional nurturing and a major boost to intuition. It will obviously be conjunct the North Node in Pisces, which is about fated growth and spiritual alignment. And the energy to me feels like, it's like a deep emotional release, heightened sensitivity, but we will see that illusions are shattering, compassion rises, and the conjunction between Jupiter and Castor also adds a more kind of philosophical and like occult type themes to this as well. In terms of some of the other aspects that I think are really worthy of mentioning is we're also going to be seeing that there is a yod taking place between the lunar eclipse where the moon is conjunct the North Node. The moon is in conjunct or quincunx Mars in Libra. It's also in conjunct and quincunx Venus, which is bringing up the themes of like things that are hidden in love affairs, in creative or spiritual blocks, in childhood issues or trauma, coming out in relationships. We also see that through that quincunx, the moon is kind of serving as like the focal point for change. So we can have breakthroughs in the heart space. We can be more in tune with our own self-love. We also can be more creative, and we can work through some of the hidden fears or separation or isolation that we have from relationships and support with the in conjunction to Mars. Pluto continues his transit with, it being in Aquarius, it's retrograde, but it will be trining Uranus and Gemini. So that is talking about this continuation of an evolution that's happening for the collective. We're reflecting on where we want to go in the future. We're trying to figure out how to have different or better dialogues, how to connect, communicate, and travel differently. And I think probably one of the two aspects, maybe there's three. There are three challenging ones. One is that you see Mars in Libra, which is taking action in relationships and diplomacy, coming into an opposition with Chiron and Aries, where there can be tension in relationships as a result of unresolved personal wounds and separations. And we also see that Mars is creating a T-square to Jupiter in Cancer. So even though Jupiter's got that beautiful trine with the North Node, the Moon, and even arguably Saturn, it's a 10-degree trine, but it's a trine. The fact that we see Mars square Jupiter tells me that there's going to be a lot of tension between individuals and partnerships, and how partnerships are going to get tested, or there's going to be some rowdiness going on in relationships as a result of the need to grow and expand the home or the family. So I kind of see Jupiter squares as, it can manifest as being overly optimistic, or I guess in this case, there being an abundance of conflict or an abundance of challenges, but this is like growing pains, right? Where Jupiter in Cancer is saying, well, we, are having more kids, or, there's changes in the family, or we need to renovate our home. And these are good problems to have, but it does test certain alliances and relationships with the square to Mars, and it brings up tension to see how we're actually going to navigate some of this change. If you guys can lean into the Jupiter trine to the Moon North Node, and have faith that whatever is concluding and completing, it can actually be a really beautiful process. But I think for some people, they're going to recognize and realize that the tension or the conflicts that are going on in certain relationships are actually leading to needing to expand out of the home, or moving, or making big changes that's actually going to be happening emotionally. That's kind of pushing us to let go of old, outdated habits or places that we've been living. I do think this is going to have a big impact on the housing market. I've been saying that for a while. Personally, I think 2026 is the big turning point where I think we're going to see a breakdown of the market. But I think that this is kind of like the beginning of where it's starting to become obvious that there is something that's going on revolving around the supply of homes, and also whether or not people are willing to pay for them. I think of like Libra being the marketplace where Mars is, where people are kind of going back and forth, and they're either arguing over who's going to get the house, or who's going to pay for a house, or whether or not, people can sell homes. So I think we're going to see increased tension revolving around that. And we're going to probably start to become aware of where there's like a bubble that's going on in that department. Certainly Pisces is known for being very peaceful and kind of passionate, and focusing on kind of like surrendering. But when I think of the Mars-Jupiter square, I feel like people can really kind of get inflamed emotionally. so to say, and we can kind of see some Pisces kind of spiraling going on. So be mindful of that. The moon is also conjunct the North Node, so this means that we're tapping into things that we can't see but we feel, or we're dreaming about, or that we're seeing in meditations, or kind of like our intuition kicking in. And the moon is applying to a conjunction with Saturn, so you'll see within about 48 hours of this eclipse that there is some destined, fated, closure that has to take place. So obviously we've got Saturn at anaretic degree, 29 degrees. What's challenging, I think, is that we also see Mercury in Virgo, so it's in its home sign, it's in its domicile, where it can be the most analytical, organized, health-focused, productive, is making an opposition to the moon, okay? So Virgo wants to rationalize things, it wants to make sense of stuff, it's very kind of data-oriented, especially with Mercury. And the moon is much more abstract, emotional, sensitive, it ebbs and flows, it doesn't need to be rational, it's more kind of wild. So with that opposition, some of us are going to go, well, this is the information, or this is what I'm being told, or this is, kind of the data. And a lot of people are going to have to check in with their gut. They're going to have to go, does this resonate with me? Does this feel right? And it can represent like two distinct ends of the Pisces kind of Virgo polarity, where there can be a lot of conflict over like, what is the facts? What is the truth? What's the real information? Now, days later after the eclipse, we are going to see that the sun is coming into connection with the South Node in Virgo. So we're going to probably see a lot of information coming out revolving around changes with leadership, changes with healthcare systems, the service industry. And I do think that even though we may see a wave of layoffs, and I know we've seen them the last couple of months, we may see that there's like glitches and issues with technology, and some people might be who have been replaced by AI or software systems or other systems going back to their jobs. So you can see some people who are actually going to be returning back, or they're being called back to work, particularly in the service industry. So I think of healthcare, nurses, doctors, first responders, medics, it could be police officers, and people who may have actually lost their jobs as a result of, what's happened in recent years with the pandemic, and whether they got let go for financial reasons, or they got let go for not wanting to comply with health regulations. We can see a lot of people being asked to come back into their position, especially if it's like IT people. We could also see people who are coming back who are connecting to data innovations, technology, software development, any communications in general. So it can be media, it can also be people who are connected to education. So we can see a lot of these people potentially returning back or being called back to their jobs. Now, we will also see Mercury coming into conjunction with the South Node after the eclipse, which is going to reinforce this as well. But there's also going to be, I think, some jaw-dropping information or news that's going to be coming up, somehow connecting to leaderships and people in position of power, particularly, I think, just here in the United States as an American, of people who are kind of serving the country and working for certain departments that are associated with health and education. I think that's going to be a huge theme. So we can see that there can be major changes going on as a result of the sun being tied to Venus in Leo. Okay, so it's at a Gemini degree, and it's connected to leadership. So we can hear about a really significant change with a female leader, or a female leader kind of coming under fire. That can be happening as well. So that's pretty much the aspects for this particular eclipse. I think the other thing that I personally favor is I also like the fact that we see Jupiter coming into a trine with Juno and Scorpio. So even though for some people the Mars-Jupiter, square is like, oh my God, am I going to have issues in my relationship or with my partner or with my business partner? There can be tension, but tension can promote growth, and it can make us aware of where we need to grow emotionally. But Jupiter and Juno were married, okay? They were husband and wife. So the fact that Jupiter is trining Juno does make me feel like, even though there is some pressure, if we are tapping into spiritual practices, meditation, even for some people, it's going to be, Pisces is church or scripture or meditating or doing spiritual work with their partner, there can actually be a lot of growth and like togetherness and positive changes that can happen in relationships as well. Now, when we get into the degree theory and the Sabian symbols, which you guys know are like my favorite things, basically it's going to give us a little bit more context for what's going to be taking place around the time of this particular eclipse. Now, 15 degrees corresponds to Gemini energy. If you guys follow degree theory, so does like 3, 15, and 27. They all carry the energy of Gemini. So when we look at this under the lens of Pisces, it's going to be infusing the placement with duality and adaptability, communication, and curiosity, as well as short distance movement, or sibling-like dynamics. So in Pisces, this is a mutable water sign, obviously that's connected to intuition and disillusion. 15 degrees Pisces blends Gemini's mental agility with Piscean empathy, often manifesting as versatile spirituality, intuitive conversations, or scattered dreams that need integration. So as an example, a person with a moon at 15 degrees of Pisces might excel in, empathic counseling because of Gemini's communication plus Pisces kind of compassion, but struggle with indecisiveness in emotional matters, or in transit, it could signal news about a spiritual retreat, okay, or spiritual travels, or unexpected communication, or intuitive insights that kind of comes out of the blue. Now, we do read the Sabian symbol for 16 degrees of Pisces because we do round up, and the Sabian symbol for 16 degrees of Pisces is, in the quiet of his study, a creative individual experiences a flow of inspiration. I was laughing earlier when I was reading this because I was like, yeah, that checks out. As somebody who's been spending a lot of time in my office lately, I feel that. This symbolizes a sacred moment of celerity, receptivity to divine or subconscious ideas, emphasizing inner peace, leading to creative or spiritual breakthroughs. So meanings include tapping into universal wisdom, the importance of quiet reflection for innovation, and the flow of intuition as a sacred gift. So it's encouraging kind of like withdrawal from chaos to receive guidance. Okay, so meditation, isolation, time away. And that trine to Jupiter makes me feel like, if you can create a little cozy, space in your room or in your house or in your apartment, if it's a cozy corner by a bookshelf, or if you have a meditation room, or if you've got, a artist studio or something like that, these are going to be like your retreat spaces. And, an example that I give is like an artist, like a painter or a writer, suddenly inspired during meditation, and this leads to like a masterpiece, or personally someone receiving a life-changing intuitive hunch in solitude, such as a career pivot towards healing arts. I mean, that's definitely possible here. But in a negative sense, it could also warn against isolation, blocking collaboration with other people. So if we put it all together and we connect the dots, the Gemini influence 15 degrees adds more mental duality to the Sabian's inspirational flow, suggesting that inspiration actually comes through curious exploration. And this could be, reading diverse sources, listening to new podcasts, picking up new hobbies, rather than pure silence. And it's creating a dynamic blend of intellectual and spiritual receptivity. Now, the fixed stars that are connected to this particular eclipse is interesting. I wanted to focus predominantly on the eclipse and what it's connected to around that 15 degrees of Pisces, as well as where Jupiter, the ruler, is being connected to 19 degrees of Cancer. So these are the two that I'm going to talk about today. We see at the time of the eclipse, around 15 degrees of Pisces, there is Achenar. We see a conjunction to that star, and it's a bright star at the end of Eridanatus, which is known as the river constellation, and it symbolizes the mouth of the river. So in astrological meaning, these stars have associations with Jupiter, and it's considered to be fortunate. So it's like a Jupiter-like energy that brings sudden success in public roles, religious or philosophical beliefs, and obviously access to higher realms. We can see intensity here, passion, and transformation, and it can indicate, somebody who is very patient and inclined to, religion, and individuals rising to, kind of a place of position where they're getting recognition, but with obvious risks of overwhelm of emotions and like river-like floods of change. So you guys know astrologically, when we see eclipses in Pisces in the past, especially last year, that's when we saw all the floods that were happening in, all over the world, but we saw a lot of them here in the United States. So sometimes astrology is literal, sometimes it's figurative, but it can be indicating that there is something that's going to be going on with rivers. Now, if we look at the mythology that's kind of tied to this, From the Greek myth, this actually represents the river where the pantheon fell after failing to control the sun chariot. So it kind of foretells hubris leading to a downfall, but a rebirth through water. And that's like the Pisces kind of baptismal theme. And in eclipses, it predicts collective falls in leadership or illusions, followed by spiritual renewal. Ancient Babylonians saw river stars as omens for flood or emotional upheaval. Obviously, with Pisces eclipses, we've definitely seen lots of tears, emotions, kind of clearing stuff, and we will probably see more of that that's coming through the eclipses, although I'm optimistic that the trines to Jupiter can bring happy tears for some people. I think with the eclipse impact, it's amplifying that trine to Jupiter, and I'm expecting global philosophical shifts or religious awakenings, but we can, and we need to be with Jupiter square Mars, watching for very passionate overreactions. Now, Jupiter, the ruler, on the other hand, is going to be at 19 degrees of Cancer. So it's actually a conjunct Castor, which has philosophical and occult kind of interests. This is a star that is associated with loss through law, speculation or travel, and danger of judicial sentence, high performance in public affairs, and sudden fame. So this could be good or bad. So kind of reading between the lines here, guys, we do see Jupiter that's in a loose trine to Saturn. I think that this is an eclipse that's going to surprise a lot of people, that over the next year, we're going to see a lot of people in high positions of power or leadership or government that are actually going to be being summoned to the courts or going to be held accountable for a laundry list of things that they are doing that has not been disclosed to the public. So it can be where there's been, quote unquote humanitarian efforts, when in reality, it was kind of a bait and switch and people were taking donations and proceeds and lining their own pockets. We can also see themes where certain politicians and people in positions of power might actually be facing jail time. Certainly Jupiter rules law, so it can be going back to the law of the land and traditional laws, especially pertaining to your home country. And we can definitely see, I think, with this particular mythology of Castor, he was one of two twins. It was actually very close to the kind of Gemini area of the skies. So the mythology of Castor, the modal twin, Castor and Pollux are twin brothers. Castor is like the moral one, the son of King Dionysus and Leda. And then we have Pollux, who is the son of Zeus and Leda. And they were considered inseparable heroes. We saw, them kind of connecting to people like horsemen, boxers, protector of sailors. And these symbolize brotherhood and duality, moral and immoral, and sacrifice and eternal bonds. Now, after Castor's death in battle, Pollux shared immortality, and Zeus placed them in the Gemini constellation, alternating between Olympus and Hades. So this foretells themes of human vulnerability, and obviously, like being heroes, they became, kind of known for becoming famous for their losses. And I think that's kind of tied to the eclipse context here as well. So the impact is that it can be obviously enhanced because of trines, where we see expansive, public occult pursuits, but also risks of judicial or speculative setbacks and sudden collective fame that's tied to duality. So, pairs, siblings, people who have famous relatives. We can also see that there can be like a lot of doubles, like people are getting double charged, or people are coming back for two court appearances, or that, we're seeing that there's been two sides of the story that's starting to unfold. Now, when we think of the themes of the lunar eclipse in Pisces, if we kind of put it all together, I feel like this is about, spiritually karmic culminations in dreams, empathy, and surrender. And many of us are being pushed to release victimhood or escapism tendencies. I feel like Castor coming in with the conjunction to Jupiter is definitely adding themes that are kind of connected to occultism. So we might hear more about occultism and, ties to certain practices in government. It can also be bringing up a lot of religious or philosophical kind of debates and talking about the intertwine between, what's going on with religion and also like the homeland, or Jupiter being in Cancer is going to be a lot about countries and their focus on their, legal or kind of religious or spiritual beliefs, or philosophical beliefs, I guess I should say. And whether or not it's working or meshing well with what's been going on globally with immigration. So when we see certain countries that, for example, are predominantly, Catholic or Christian, where we're starting to see other people coming from Middle East or Muslim countries, or, other belief systems, and whether or not things are actually meshing and merging. And Jupiter in Cancer can really be a lot about some countries getting back down to their core beliefs, both legally, but also in terms of their founding kind of like ethical and religious or kind of spiritual philosophies as well. So we can see that be coming up in a very big way. I do think that astrologically, like I said, this is going to be impacting Pisces the most, but also the mutable signs. So, Virgo, Gemini, and Sagittarius, you guys are going to be feeling this in a big way, especially if you have any planets around that 13 to 17 degrees. And obviously, it's going to represent kind of closure and completions. I do think personally, it's going to be beneficial for emotional clarity, and having sudden realizations about boundaries or addictions is going to be a theme. And potential sudden fame or losses via public affairs is very possible because of like the tie with the moon, because the moon kind of deals with fate. I do think we might see some family members becoming aware of where there is either addiction issues, emotional or psychological issues, or like family karma that's coming up that we are needing to clear, or that we're needing to kind of heal. And collectively, I do think we're going to see that theme of global awakening to compassion, environmental or spiritual or religious issues, and obviously that theme of duality. So kind of looking at two sides of a situation and trying to see whether or not they can come together as one. Now, for what the aspects foretell for the lunar eclipse, obviously, that trine involving Castor, I think, can bring expansive emotional healing, family, and inner world growth. And it does foretell abundance through vulnerability. Some people might take up more philosophical, religious, or kind of occult-related interests. Some people who are involved in that can have sudden fame in public affairs, but also there can be losses through law and speculation, travel, or judicial dangers because of that connection with those stars. However, the eclipse conjunct the North Node is going to be a destiny activation. So it's really saying that we're going to have breakthroughs if we're using our intuition, especially if we're involved in creative pursuits or any long-term spiritual evolution. However, it does oppose Mercury and the Sun in Virgo. So we're going to see tension between kind of chaos, which is Pisces, and order, which is Virgo, which is really foretelling resolutions in health, work, or illusions. Ultimately, the outcome is going to really be dependent on your own personal chart, but I think it is positive for growth. Just watch for emotional overwhelm, and that these themes are going to be playing out for the better part of the next 6 months, and it's going to put an emphasis on duality and sacrifice and expansions. Now, when I was looking at the eclipse that we had earlier this year, when we had the Virgo eclipse, obviously we saw some squares that were involving Jupiter, so the expansion and the change was kind of uncomfortable. And we were seeing some of the same themes that was kind of going on last year. So I feel like this eclipse is actually going to be a lot better, a lot easier to navigate, and a lot more fortuitous for us, both personally and collectively, than what we've experienced in the past. So I hope that you guys see some of the same things kind of coming up for you in September. Now, in terms of my expanded predictions for the world events with this lunar eclipse in Pisces, I do think that obviously, I've said emotional global awakening, heightened sensitivity will lead to mass empathy movements. So we can see protests for humanitarian causes and refugee crisis resolving. But also, a lot of this is going to be tied to what's going on with people who are homeless, because Pisces deals with people who are lost and wandering. And that could be immigration. That could also be, people who are on the streets, or drug addicts, or it can be, people, kind of protesting for changes going on with the prison system. But I do think that a lot of this is going to be connected to how we can actually help those and provide homes. And so that could be people in the foster care system, that could be missing children, that could be reuniting veterans with their family. That could be helping family members who are dealing with addiction, get help or get care. We'll definitely see a lot of these things manifesting over the next couple of months. And in terms of environmental shifts, because Pisces is water energy and that connection to the river myth, as I have in the past, I remember last year telling everybody like we're going to see floods and we're going to see fires, and we saw it. So I'm seeing this again. I do predict that there is going to be floods, especially connecting to like rivers, dams, levees, like that kind of stuff, and also potential ocean disasters, especially for homes that live near coastal cities. We can see like flooding and issues there. And also breakthroughs in like climate action. So I do think there's going to be a lot of themes around water, guys. Watch the water. I don't know if it's going to be the health of water. I don't know if it's going to be more in international water treaties, if it's going to be about water treatment, or if there's going to be stuff that's exposed about like oil spills. That could be another thing that we could see. And obviously Castor as like a sailor, like he's like a protector of sailors. So this is bringing up anything kind of connected to the Navy or any kind of like water coastal events that are connected to ports and where we may have trade or Navy or military activity. Now, for spiritual and religious revelations, honestly, Jupiter really does boost faith. And I think that's the positive here is like, I remember telling everybody like 2 years ago when Saturn and Neptune go into Pisces, you're going to see this huge like resurgence and reemergence of people who are going back to church and, their traditional kind of like religious foundations and reading scripture. A bunch of people are going to get baptized and like you're going to see that. That still happens with this eclipse as well. Because of the trine to Jupiter, we will see a connection to major religious events, but also scandals exposed, like, leaders that are failing or corruption that's going on, in the churches. And we're probably going to see some push for like interfaith unity between different religions. But obviously, yeah, cult interests are like a huge theme with some of the fixed stars here. So some people who are involved in those particular, themes or those interests, or maybe they're doing some kind of rituals revolving around fame, that could also be powerful as well. And in terms of leadership and power dynamics, the North Node connection here is fated changes in government, okay? Because Saturn's in Pisces too, by the way. So this is going to bring up, I think, major changes when it comes to elections or resignations in visible countries like Europe or Asia, philosophical reforms, legal reforms, and obviously this is a placement that's high preferment for public affairs and judicial dangers. So I think we're going to hear stuff about like, specialized grand juries and stuff that's going to be coming out in public down the road about, prosecution of certain high-level individuals who are tied to leadership, and the awareness of things that they have done that we are now just becoming aware of. Now, the other thing to consider is health and mental wellness. I think that's a huge theme when we look at Virgo and Pisces. Obviously, the opposition to the Virgo sun is going to bring up global mental health focus, but also pandemics easing or illusions shattering, misinformation exposed. I can't say this enough. I can say this because this is like one of my private videos, but there is about to be major disclosure about the pandemic. I think we're going to see this more tied to the solar eclipse in Virgo than this one, because people are still going to be kind of dazed and confused with the Pisces eclipse. But I think that we're going to start to actually get real factual information and damning data and proof that there have been people who have lied, have taken payments, they have also abused their positions of power, they have misled the public, and other leaders into buying into or believing that, certain cures or certain treatments or certain protocols that needed to be followed were actually not very helpful at all. And I do think that there is a possibility of there being other issues with pandemics that can be coming as a result of the solar eclipse in Virgo, but we'll get to that in a minute. Just know that this is now about disclosure and misinformation that's starting to be exposed. In terms of economic and financial ripples, obviously with, Jupiter in Cancer, it's touching on those family and security themes. I do think we could see some stock market volatility, but it's more tied to like emotional reactions with what's going on in the market. and opportunities in, compassionate industries. So think like charity, the arts, nonprofit stuff. And it does warn of losses through speculation or travel. Now, we do see themes of conflict resolution with both of the eclipses. I think Pisces is really about compassion. So there may be more of an emphasis on peace talks during ongoing wars, like in the Middle East. But we can also see the risk of deception or escapist policies failing. So this brings up, the themes of like brotherhood, duality, and resolutions. Can we work together, or, do we fall apart? And do we need to separate, or, is one side of the relationship kind of like a dead end? Now, in terms of cultural and artistic, booms, we do see that during Pisces eclipses. Definitely intuitive spikes, especially with like inspirational art, music waves, media scandals, or dream-inspired innovations, and sudden fame for public dealings for people who are going to have this in like maybe the 5th, the 7th, the 10th, and the 11th house. We can also see that this can bring major changes to the film industry, the music industry, healthcare, obviously, anything connected to pharmaceuticals, that too. Those are all kind of Pisces realm. And over the long term, even though this is kind of a concluding eclipse, so it's wrapping up what we have been planting really since the beginning of March of this year, it can take 6 months to see the events of this totally manifest. So eclipses happen, but that doesn't mean something happens that very day. This is about collective surrender to higher ideals, but there will be some initial chaos from unresolved past karma. I'm going to double down on that because Saturn and Neptune are going back into Pisces, and also the duality themes of Castor, where we're like, okay, well, is it good or is it bad? And I think there's going to be a lot of debate about the things that we need to uncover or need to resolve or need to get clarity on, and where we've been too forgiving, too compassionate, too illogical. And now the mess that's created when Saturn and Neptune go back into Pisces. So if we don't have enough leadership, oversight, if we don't have enough integrity, if we don't have enough checks and balances, when Saturn and Neptune go back into Pisces, we're going to start to see where it's almost like we've been almost shooting ourselves in the foot, pun intended, Pisces, by being too forgiving or too understanding or too willing to overlook things. So just like as an example, like some of the stuff that's going on right now, like, you see in the news here in the United States, recently there was like a big rig accident that killed 3 Americans. And the driver of the big rig was, I believe, an immigrant. I don't know if they were documented or undocumented, that doesn't matter. But, there has been so much going on in the media where people are going back and forth being like, well, we need to have more regulations, or we can't just be giving jobs to people who haven't gone through the proper channels of training and certification for safety when it comes to driving these vehicles and making sure that they're safe on the road. So, now they're saying that they need to be, stricter with who they're going to be giving some of these licenses to. And then on the other side of the coin, you see a lot of people who are pushing back going, well, we're raising money and we're going to do a GoFundMe and we're going to get that person all the legal support they need, and they shouldn't be deported and they should not be charged with, being negligent in driving, right? And so this is like the duality theme that I'm talking about, where you go back and forth and it's like, well, which side is the right side? And if we're being too kind and compassionate, are we putting other people at risk? And is there no stability? Is there a sense of lawlessness? Or on the other side, are we being too strict and limiting, and are we isolating ourselves by not opening ourselves up to being able to work with people from other countries and be able to kind of, support, this transportation of goods? So I'm not talking about which one's right or wrong, but more showing you guys what you're going to see in terms of the duality with this particular axis. Now, as an overview, this is what the chart looks like. Something else to kind of think about is, I'm just realizing, as an overview of the solar eclipse that we're going to see in Virgo, this is the eclipse for Virgo that we're going to be looking at now. Sorry guys, getting my slides mixed up. Now we're going to be talking about what is going to be manifesting for the solar eclipse. So we're kind of moving through the Pisces stuff. Now we're going to look at the solar eclipse, and this will be on September 21st. 2025 in Virgo at 29 degrees, okay? So this will be the partial solar eclipse. So this is more action-oriented. This one is a doozy. If you guys look at the aspects, oh my goodness. 29 degrees, sun and moon, new moon, opposition to Saturn in Pisces, trine to Uranus in Gemini, trine to Pluto in Aquarius, kind of a slight sextile to Jupiter in Cancer, and quincunx sitting conjunct to Chiron in Aries. Wow, wow, wow. So this will be a partial solar eclipse. It's at a critical anaretic degree, 29, which represents urgency and completion. So it's like, my interpretation of this is like, we have to do this right now, right? There's like a sense of urgency and emergency here. And obviously Virgo is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is going to be at 5 degrees of Libra, and that's going to be conjunct a fixed star called Zanaya. Now, I think the biggest focus here in terms of the aspects is the opposition to Saturn. And you guys know Saturn's like a roadblock. It represents a stop sign, a speed bump, you can't pass, you know, type of stuff. So when we see an opposition in a new moon, it means that we have to take action, but in order to do so, we have to become aware of what's blocking us, right? What's limiting us from moving forward. So Saturn is in Pisces, so it can represent, so there's some kind of challenge or issue revolving around visibility, revolving around structure and dreams and reality. Obviously, Neptune is at 0 degrees, so the eclipse doesn't just oppose Saturn, it also opposes Neptune. The trine to Uranus and also Pluto, I think, is innovative when it comes to transformations. And Mercury in Libra is in a close orb to the eclipse. It's about 6 degrees away, so it's technically still combust. So it means that there can be lots of like sudden information, news, media, things kind of coming out. Sudden conversations that we're having with relationships, partnerships. I think it's opening up the floodgates to a lot of people getting involved legally, especially when it comes to, unfortunately, suing governments, suing employers, people who have had accidents. I think we're going to see a lot of accidents because unfortunately that's what Virgo can be about. Unexpected accidents, unexpected job loss, people who are going to be getting laid off. And it's a lot. I think that trines to Uranus and Pluto can provide those sudden insights and powerful communication. So, Mercury in Libra is like, if you need a lawyer, if you need a counselor, if you need a therapist, if you need feedback, if you're needing to better communicate with your partner, like hard times create strong men. This is a hard times eclipse. And what it's going to teach you is that you need to lean on your community with Mercury trine Pluto. You have to have good friends. You have to have networks. You have to have people that are going to support you and have your back. In order to do that, with the trine between Mercury and Uranus in Gemini, it means that we also have to, get active in our local communities, get to know our neighbors. We have to be willing to learn how to communicate, to be diplomatic and negotiate, and meet in the middle. So there's a lot of opportunity for diplomacy here if you look hard enough at the aspects. However, the sun and the moon in opposition to Saturn in Pisces makes me feel like there is going to be either shortages in supply of jobs or healthcare or care in general. There could be food shortages, especially when it comes to delivery of food, goods, and services. And there can also be like limits that are being placed on, what people can and cannot do. Saturn represents government and like anybody who is going to be ruling over things or providing like set boundaries and limits. And remember, Saturn is associated with Jupiter because it's in Pisces. So at least Jupiter and Saturn are slightly trining each other by about 7 or 8 degrees. So it means that we can expand in the Pisces area of our chart and the Cancer area of our chart as long as it's sustained growth. So it's going to take time. We're going to have to be optimistic and kind of feel our way into it emotionally. We will have to lean on communication and diplomacy for sure. But I'm looking at a yod that's taking place between Venus and Mars. See how Venus is at 2 degrees of Virgo, Mars is at 29 degrees of Libra? That's in conjunct or quincunx Saturn and Neptune, which is also highlighting the themes of, well, can we establish better relationships with partners? Can we discuss the things that we have been afraid to discuss? Are we finally letting go of, kind of selfish, outdated behaviors with Saturn and Neptune conjunct and things that we're not aware of so we can be better partners or we can connect with others? But I also think about how, the reality of the situation is that oppositions mean that there's something that's coming from outside of us that we have to deal with. So isn't it interesting that the lunar eclipse that we had in Pisces had the sun in Virgo in opposition to the moon in Pisces? And now the solar eclipse that we're having in Virgo has the sun and moon in Virgo in opposition to Saturn in Pisces, right? There's a lot of having to deal with the opposite sign. So this particular cycle of eclipses I find very interesting. And this will be setting forth what's going to be, I think, like a new 6 to 18 month cycle. This won't even become a lunar eclipse in Virgo until next year. So it'll be like at the beginning of next year, I believe it's in March, we will have a Virgo lunar eclipse, which will be very interesting because at that time, Mercury will be the ruler. It'll be retrograde in Pisces. So it's going to be very similar to the Virgo eclipse that we had in March of 2025. And we all kind of know how that went down. Anyway, we'll talk about that next year. But essentially, this means that there is urgent starts in practicality. And we're going to go, okay, that's it. I can't do this anymore. Now I have to get going. I have to get started. And at least with Mercury being the ruler in Libra, it's like if you're like, I have to get a trainer, I have to get a therapist, I have to talk to my spouse, I need to have a new business partner, I need to, get in and see my doctor, I need a lawyer, that support will be there. But it's going to come as a result of the opposition to Saturn, where you're going to go, I have hit a wall, I've hit my limit, I can't move forward, I don't know how to make sense, out of what's going on. What do I do? So, this is also going to be amplified by the air trines for mental breakthroughs, and some of the aspects to the fixed star does add artistic and social refinement. So it can be really good for social connections, collectives, joining networks, anything that deal with arts and also music. It can also be very beneficial. Now for Virgo 29 degrees, the degree theory and the Sabian symbols, 29 degrees is that energetic degree. That is the now or never, it's kind of like I always say, it's like Humpty Dumpty, like which way are you going to fall off of the wall? Are you going to fall and crack, or are you going to land on your feet? And this is considered critical because it's the last degree of that sign. So we must initiate and start something under the solar eclipse in order to better go into the Libra area of our chart. Well, Virgo represents getting our affairs in order, getting organized, getting clean, brushing our teeth, fixing our hair, everything we need to do personally before we meet other people. So this means that there is a sense of urgency that we need to get our affairs, our health, and our work in order, and we need to complete something. Now, also I've seen that 29 degrees does deal with in a way, psychic insight or clairvoyance, like visions. And the opposition to Saturn is interesting because in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, are you going to start seeing people in government or in high levels of, corporate business or whatever, start consulting with astrologers or with psychics or, people who can kind of predict and forecast? I wonder. But also, this is a karmic point and it's connected to, a culmination of some kind where lessons must be finalized, often with rushed or faded energy. Things end or transform intensely. In Virgo, the mutable earth sign of analysis and service, 29 degrees of Virgo heightens perfectionism into a breaking point, pushing for practical mastery or release over control. As an example, a sun at 29 degrees of Virgo might indicate someone who predicts health trends or clairvoyance, plus Virgo in service, but faces career endings due to burnout, or in an event, it could signal an urgent document finalization with a prophetic accuracy. I wonder, in the back of my mind with this solar eclipse, are you going to see the potential for another major health world event? I hope not, but I wonder. I wonder if there are going to be people speaking out, or if you're going to have doctors or nurses or even people who do analysis of data and information. People who will come out and go, I'm predicting the stock market's going to crash, and they have all the reasons why. Or I'm predicting that the housing market's going to crash, all the reasons why. Or I'm predicting there's going to be another pandemic, right? People will come out and they will start saying these things because of that 29 degrees, and they're going to be like, I got to get this out, I got to get it out now. And the problem is that this eclipse is going to oppose Saturn, which is retrograde, which means there is like no adult in the room. Nobody's going to want to take responsibility or accountability, or nobody's going to want to do anything about it. And they're going to be turning a blind eye to some of the stuff until it's too late. And I really feel like there is going to be some definitive, urgent things that are going on where they're going to say, we must do this now. It's imperative we do this now. And there could either be delays, media blackouts, there could be also denial of there being anything that we need to quickly kind of take care of, and lack of leadership in a moment of crisis. Now, for this, we read the 30-degree symbol of Virgo, and it's a false call unheard in attention to immediate service. It symbolizes the unwavering focus on duty, ignoring distractions for achievement, representing responsibility and soul immortality through dedicated service. Meanings include single-minded perseverance leading to success, the value of ignoring temptations, and the potential isolation from life's joys. As an example, a surgeon focused on an operation, oblivious to the outside noise, succeeding through dedication, or personally someone so absorbed in work deadlines they miss a social opportunity, learning chances for balance post-completion. In a negative light, this warns of missing the false calls or opportunities due to over-focus. So we put it all together, we connect it. The 29-degree Aneretic degree is about urgency aligning with the Sabian symbol's intense focus on completion. So it's going to amplify Virgo's service-oriented drive into more fateful, kind of endpoints, rushing to finish a task with intuitive foresight, but risking burnout from ignoring life's allurements. Very interesting. And I think that a lot of that's like the opposition. That's like, I need to do this now. It's like, no, you don't. You don't need to do anything. And as soon as Saturn and, Neptune will be there soon, and the North Node is in Pisces, a lot of people are going to be so emotionally overwhelmed, so dazed and confused, so much in la-la land. Like, if you guys remember earlier this year, that's why everybody was like, why am I so tired? Why do I have no motivation? Why do I not want to do anything? And Pisces is rest. And so to some extent, part of me feels inclined to tell people that's like, look, we can't really control the outcome. All we can do is have faith and be optimistic and be in tune and be taking care of our emotions, because we're, emotions and intention goes, energy flows literally with these eclipses. So if you're giving it to, oh my God, end of the world, worst case scenario, when it could be, well, certain things need to kind of collapse, they need to dissolve so we can get back down to reality. We can actually start, taking care of some of these issues. I think we're gonna be okay. But this is an eclipse that's definitely going to be a real pain, I think, for a lot of people, unfortunately, especially people in positions of leadership. I think that's really going to be a big one. Now, the fixed stars associated with the solar eclipse is going to be interesting. So we are going to be seeing that it's conjunct Merkab, and this is obviously anywhere between like 28 and 29 degrees of Virgo. And this is a star in the sail of Argo Navis, which is a ship constellation, which is now known as Vela. And it's of the nature of Saturn and Jupiter. And, it's very knowledgeable. It deals with educational work, voyages, boats, going over water, going over seas, practical wisdom, but it tests your endurance. Astrologically, I think the Aneretic degree here not only amplifies urgency, but Merkab brings the themes of exploration. So whether that's learning and spiritual devotion, but I think with like the Jupiter-Saturn blend, it's about structured expansion, and it has the potential for honorable achievements through trials. Now, the mythology and kind of lore tied to this is from Greek mythology, where Argo Navis is Jason's ship in the quest for the Golden Fleece, and it symbolizes heroic voyages, teamwork, adventure amid perils, and it foretells quests for golden knowledge, for truth, but it risks storms and delays. So in eclipses, it predicts collective journeys, like literal travel or intellectual, spiritual quests with fated new beginnings, but obviously some stormy weather. Now, I think the eclipse impact with the opposition with Saturn and Neptune is very important. This shows us the tension between the grounded voyages and the knowledge, and Saturn's kind of restrictions and Neptune's illusions. So it is foretelling 6 to 18 months of potential disillusionment, especially in ideals revolving around, education. So I do think we're going to see scandals in academia, and obviously travel industries might take a hit. But also we're going to see, opportunities for spiritual growth, and global predictions include delayed explorations like space and tech voyages that get tested, reality checks on dreams leading to wiser people, enduring reforms, personal urgency to complete karmic lessons in service and learning with potential weariness, but innovative breakthroughs. Now, Mercury is the ruler of this eclipse. It's at 5 degrees of Libra. It's conjunct Zanaya, which is known for musical and artistic ability and gain through writing short stories and popularity, social success, and having many friends, especially the opposite sex, right, Libra. So it can lead to refinement among, some of your creative endeavors, enterprising honors in careers and activities, and it's known for assisting friends, which is cool because it trines Pluto in Aquarius, it trines Uranus in Gemini, and it's great for entertaining and gatherings, especially anything dealing with like writing or public affairs. However, it's also known for being a little abrupt and having rough manners. And it is well aspected during this eclipse, so I think that we're going to see some people are really going to have a talent for negotiating peace. Mercury in Libra is good for diplomacy and obviously intuition and halting battles and seeking terms. Now, Mercury is loosely in opposition to Saturn as well as Neptune. So that can mean that there are some people who are not sure how to connect. There could be some translation issues. There could be some issues with like culturally not seeing eye to eye. It could also represent wanting to be diplomatic, but we need to know where other people stand, or we need them to participate and like show up. And I think that for the most part, the Mercury trines are going to be really great for artists, and it can really help socially. And when it comes to collaboration, agreements like contracts, and peacemaking, even in the midst of what can feel like some oppositional challenges. And I do think that it can bring creative and public success for some people, but it can also be abrupt separations, limitations, blockages for others, and that's just due to the nature of the opposition to Saturn and Neptune. Now for Virgo 29-degree solar eclipse, what you want to watch for spiritually is like new beginnings in service, health, and discernment. We want to focus on releasing outdated routines for more purified paths. And Mercury in Libra adds relational balance and artistic and refined vibes. Great time for people who are like, I'm getting a new doctor, I'm getting back to the gym, I'm going to go and do some blood work, I'm working with a new coach, I'm looking for a new job. And I want to use that opposition to Saturn to be like, I want to get out of, feeling stuck. I want to get better organized and not feel like I have to be so heavily kind of lost in the fog. Granted, we're going to have a couple months to work through this eclipse. We're going to have a couple more months of Saturn and Neptune in Pisces until the new year as well. But guys, the universe gave us a double dose of 2 new moons in Virgo, one at 0 degrees and now one at 29 degrees. So if you didn't get your shift in order under the new moon at 0 degrees, this one's going to be like, I got to do this. I got to do it now. Now, because it's technically near the South Node, and we are going to see planets dancing around the South Node in September, this will bring fated releases, and it obviously will affect the very late degree of the mutable signs. So like 27, 28, 29 degrees of Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. But also, if you have anything 0 to about 2 degrees of the cardinal signs, because it's 29 degrees, it's almost at 0 degrees of Libra, you guys need to pay attention as well. So Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, anything around 0 to 2 degrees, you're feeling the effects of this eclipse. Now, personally, I'm expecting fresh starts in daily work, your life, your wellness, your pets even. Virgo can be about pets. I've been saying for some time that I think there's going to be a lot of revelations revolving around this solar eclipse where we're going to actually see that there is some similarities in connection to pet health and human health, and pet health and human health in terms of like diet. So Saturn is usually the standard. It is the doctors, the specialists, the professionals. And I think that we're going to see some very contradicting evidence that's coming out about what, doctors say we should be eating versus, how the bodies are actually responding to the traditional food pyramid. what doctors are telling us what medications we could take or should take versus what's actually happening, and whether or not it's healing something or if it's just either creating more symptoms or just kind of treating, you know, the reactions to stuff. I'm particularly concerned about the impact that this is going to have about people when it comes to their health and like the legal side of things. If people feel like they actually are going to have certain cases or legal recourse to get their jobs back, right? To get compensation if they've been injured by the pharmaceutical company. If there is going to be insight and information that's going to come out about the reality of, oh, actually, should we be vaccinating our animals? We've been told that we're supposed to do that, but is there going to be, you know, evidence that's going to come out that's actually showing that there's toxic chemicals and metals and other things that we're putting into our pets? That's what I think looking at the eclipse, but we'll see. As well as pet food that could be recalled, and some damning information that's coming out about water contamination, okay? And that could be coastal cities that have water contamination in the beaches and the bays. That could be water supplies that are getting, you know, spiked or getting contaminated, and we could see certain cities that are under like a water boil watch. And also the reality of water treatment plants and like tap water and what we're consuming. Like now is the best time in the entire world to be going and getting a really good water system, whether you have a sourced, you know, place that you're getting your water from, if you're getting spring water, if you're doing reverse osmosis systems. But the missing minerals in your water, the contaminations that's in your water, the pharmaceuticals, the biohazards, the just debris and the other gross things that are in the water that you're consuming, and how that's impacting your immune system, right? You just think about like how many people just throw stuff, you know, down the toilet, or they throw stuff in the sinks. If you guys think that that's not actually getting into your systems, you're crazy, especially when I think about the biohazard materials that are, you know, gotten rid of from hospitals or, you know, medical centers. I think about medications that are just dumped down the sink and how that's impacting our hormones, our psychic abilities, our psychological kind of health. Like, I think there's a lot of stuff that's going to be coming out about this. And I think that we're going to start to kind of find out that, you know, these campaigns like they've had in New York and other cities that are like, oh, drink the water. Guys, if we start suddenly seeing a bunch of stuff where they're pushing you to drink the tap water, run the other way. If they start suddenly saying, hey, you know what, there is this new medication and, you know, we're going to provide it to you. In particular, I'm keeping an eye on the stuff that's coming out with them pushing, they have new aerosol flu vaccines, okay? That's something else that I'm watching with this eclipse, where they're telling people, well, we can mail it to you and you don't even need to use a needle. You can just, you know, ingest something into your nasal cavity. Guys, Mars is at 29 degrees of Libra. That means that we're potentially going to be seeing some stuff that can be creating inflammation or putting us off balance, or there could be some major legal or relationship kind of issues that can kind of come up. And that makes me wonder, like, is there going to be new future laws revolving around pharmaceuticals and stuff that, you know, they have to tell us, like the pamphlets, like when you go and take a new medication or when you get a vaccine or whatever, like, do they actually legally now have to start telling you the potential effects? I wonder. I'm just speculating based off of what's kind of going on in the world right now and what I'm seeing with the news, but I am personally rather concerned looking at this eclipse thinking there's going to be another health scare that's going to come out, and they're either going to tell people, okay, we need to get this solution out there or this medication out there or this is what you need to take, when in reality we need to be using common sense. We need to be asking the right questions. We need to be making sure that we are trying to focus more on getting back down to the basics and trying to treat things naturally, because that's what Virgo is all about. And we may see certain naturopaths, holistic doctors, functional medicine doctors, Eastern medicine doctors, herbalists, people coming out being like, actually, no, there's proof that what you guys are recommending is not actually going to fix things. This is more of what we need to do. And even still, when this becomes a full moon lunar eclipse next year, we're going to be in the middle of a Mercury retrograde. And it's going to be right when, you know, Saturn and Neptune are getting ready to go into Aries. And I got to tell you guys, like, 2026 is going to hit a lot of people like whiplash, because we're going to come out of what has been some very confusing, chaotic, and downright clown world type things that have been happening over the last several years. And it's going to be like a harsh in your face, this is what we're doing now, and now people have to wake up. So it's possible that this eclipse could actually bring about some very swift and sudden changes with leadership, with obviously how we're eating. I mean, you know, we're in the midst of watching here in the United States, lots of changes going on with like the EBT programs and people who are getting, you know, like state aid for, you know, medical and also for groceries and for food. You know, the oppositions to Saturn means that the government's saying you're being cut off, no more. So cut off of what? You know, limitation in what foods you can buy, limitations in what medical services you do receive, what you're getting in terms of your cost of living. You know, if you're somebody who is living underneath a certain pay grade, or you are a part of a certain demographic, or you're disabled, or anything like that, we're going to start seeing major changes, and it's already happening. Many of the states will not go into full effect until next year. But what happens when suddenly the government is not bankrolling a bunch of people who want to buy fast food, who want to buy junk food, who want to get sodas, who want to go and get a bunch of packaged foods, who just, you know, habitually stay on that system, and they continue to consume that, and then they get sick, and then, you know, the government's also going to be then funding those people who are dealing with things like diabetes. Virgo is very much tied to diabetes, by the way. So we might hear some breakthroughs revolving around, well, the root causes of this, and really it starts with how we are supplying the food, what we're putting in the food, what we're preserving the food with, what is not healthy. And you're going to see a cascade effect over the next year, where not only are food companies going to have to start complying with getting rid of some of these toxic, addictive chemicals that's in the food, but also when the US government's no longer bankrolling people to buy that, guys, what's going to happen with those food companies? They're going to start to collapse. We're going to see some changes going on with distribution, because if people aren't buying it, or people can't afford it, or people realize what's really in it, we're going to start to see that kind of crumble and break down. So you're crazy if you don't think that this eclipse isn't a crisis point for a lot of people. And I think it's going to be a wake-up point to kind of realize like what's actually in our food, what's actually in our water, what real medicine is. And now we're finally going to be getting back to a point of having real data and information, I believe. So look forward to some of these fresh starts that can happen with health or wellness. Just be mindful that we have to deal with some of the, you know, illusions head on, and the trines are bringing innovative support from other people, new networks, new information, new communication. Watch for shifts in systems like healthcare, environment, government-related systems, and we're moving towards efficiency and innovation, and obviously hoping for, you know, more peace negotiations and diplomacy if possible. Now, in terms of what the aspects foretell for the solar eclipse, obviously, you know, the big one is the Saturn-Neptune opposition, and this is where boundaries meet dreams. So major challenges and Saturn's restrictions will clash with Neptune's illusions, foretelling potential confusion, delays, or disillusionment. So, you know, we have to really ground our energies out, because some of us can be feeling like we're like, this is crazy town. And we can also see that there's opportunity for disciplined spirituality and being more resilient when it comes to our boundaries. Now, the trine that we'll see with Mercury, you know, I think is great. Not only does Mercury trine Uranus and Pluto, but this eclipse trines Uranus and Pluto as well. So we're going to see sudden innovations and power shifts. And I'm predicting breakthroughs in tech and society, as well as personal empowerment. With Mercury conjunct that star making trines, we're going to see that it's about having clear communication, and I think a clear defined rule of law. Legal stuff is Libra. And it's also about harmonious resolutions and partnerships. We just want to avoid overthinking. But if you're an artist, or if you're trying to focus on self-promotion, or, you know, there could be writing gains. This could be good for media, for blogs, for podcasts, and social success, refinement, and, you know, peace negotiation is possible. Using our intuition is also going to be a big theme here, and like needing to differentiate like what actually is and is not real. And we'll see lots of enhancement of like mental abilities. So sudden ideas, transformative dialogues, and obviously Mercury in Libra is balanced, and it's going to be good for negotiations, enterprising honors, wide friends, entertaining public affairs. And for the outcome on this one, because this is a solar eclipse, so you guys are going to see in the immediate next like month or so, there's going to be some changes, but this will span from about 6 to 18 months. We're going to be really watching the full moon in Virgo next year and what's manifesting there. Just know that the oppositions do require you to look at what's going on in Pisces. So you might even want to be looking at the lunar eclipse, what comes up for you to better handle the solar eclipse. I would also be watching when Mercury comes into opposition with Saturn, because Mercury will oppose Saturn at 29 degrees of Virgo. And when that happens, it'll be like, I think like a week before the eclipse, and it's going to start foreshadowing what's going to happen with the solar eclipse. And we'll see tests and challenges of endurance, but I think the trines are going to give us the necessary tools to be able to move forward. And that could be through innovations in technology or new groups. That's very possible. But I think this is also where there is development happening so quickly. We're seeing such a quick evolution with technology and AI that it could quite literally destabilize a lot of jobs, especially next year. We're going to see this a lot next year. And then it's going to be people being like, okay, well, now what do we do for work? Or now how do we realign or adjust our schedules? So it'll be interesting to see how that starts to kind of play out over the next couple of months. Now, for the potential countries affected by the solar eclipse, obviously this one is not having as far of reach. This one's going to be most, visible, obviously, in specific areas. So it's a partial eclipse. We're going to see it very far south in terms of where it is on the map that I showed you guys earlier. And it is going to trigger the Virgo themes like health and service. Most of the visibility is going to be around New Zealand and Antarctica. Okay, so if you happen to be somebody who's living in like New Zealand or even parts of Australia, you might see some of the effects of this. But it'll be high coverage in New Zealand, about 85%. And I'm expecting major practical reforms and health initiatives. Parts of the eastern coast of Australia might have visibility as well, near like Queensland. And this will bring systemic changes and environmental or agricultural shifts. We can also see shifts in terms of their healthcare and leadership or health crisis. And parts of the Pacific Islands like Fiji, Tonga, Samoa, and French Polynesia, we could see major community resets and innovation, but also more isolation in these areas. I'm expecting there to be a lot of news about Antarctica coming out over the next months into the next year. And it can be, there's a lot of conspiracy theories about Antarctica or what's going on there. But I think we're going to hear more about scientific breakthroughs and also like logistical tests. And there can be ripple effects with all the eclipses. So there can be some things that are going on in some of these countries that can actually be impacting the news and relationships with other countries around the world. And I think really it's going to be about those practical awakenings. And I think in some of these places like New Zealand, Australia, even parts of like the Pacific Islands, resisting limitations or resisting if they try to say, well, there's an illness or there's something going on, they're going to push back and they're going to maybe not want to go into lockdowns, or they're not going to want to have stuff that's going to be very limiting when it comes to what healthcare they have access to, or the changes that can be happening with government or leadership or even with jobs. All right, so as for my expanded predictions for the world for the solar eclipse that's taking place in Virgo, obviously this is going to bring up systemic reforms. Obviously, with Virgo precision. So global policy overhauls in healthcare and labor. So worker rights, strikes might be resolved. We can also see that the Mercury trines aid diplomatic breakthroughs and peace negotiation talents. For economic and tech innovations, the Uranus-Pluto trine can bring breakthroughs in AI and sustainability. Definitely some market surprises and power shifts like crypto regulations. But Mercury adds communicative ease and gains through writing and public affairs. For health crisis and resolutions, we've talked about this a lot, but obviously the opposition to Saturn can bring up pandemics or food shortages that are tested. And I think it's going to be showing us like disillusionment around how we handle these issues. But Neptune adds compassionate aid, and there can be themes connecting to agricultural impact, like harvest themes is very much Virgo, especially like grain and wheat. And in some areas where there has been less rain or less water, how they're kind of faring with their crops versus places that have been flooded or they've been over inundated with water, and how that's impacted agriculture. For environmental connections, obviously for Virgo, it's Earth. So we're going to be seeing themes connected to eco-innovations, but illusions shatter. And I think in particular, we're going to see where like greenwashing is exposed in Pacific regions, or where, you know, we're seeing that they're telling people, oh, we must switch to, you know, electric vehicles, or we must switch to solar, or we must focus on, you know, all these green initiatives and getting rid of like, you know, organic farming or like natural farming techniques. Like we're going to start to see that that's not actually helping the planet. Like that's going to starve people, and that's going to create a lot less food, and it's actually detrimental to not be farming in more traditional ways. So when I hear stuff about being like, you know, we need to focus on green initiatives and this and that, and, you know, the fear of, you know, like CO2, I'm like thinking to myself, like, these people don't know what they're talking about, especially with like Saturn and Pisces. Nobody knows what they're talking about. So it's frustrating, but I think that we are going to start to see that the opposition brings challenges, and where people are idealistic, where they think they're actually, you know, helping the planet, when in reality they're doing things that are counterproductive. I think we're going to see themes revolving around political boundary setting. Because of Mercury in Libra, you know, diplomatic talks can succeed, but oppositions with Neptune does bring up the risk of deceptive alliances, people being dishonest or failing to come through. But the trines can bring transformative ideas, and we want to use our intuition for kind of halting battles and trying to seek peace rather than promoting more conflict and war. I do expect societal justice shifts. So with that energetic urgency, movements for equality will gain traction. Completions and ongoing issues like you know, gender and work balance. The Mercury trines can definitely innovate advocacy, and social success from friends helping is likely. And then in cultural and artistic themes, we're going to see that routines will flourish. So major media reforms, I think with like the trine to Pluto and also Uranus, that can lead to a lot of job turnover and changes, but media is going to change. We're going to see artistic funding that might come through. Reliability really frees up you know, creativity globally, and the opposition is going to test our visions with reality, and it's definitely favorable for people who are involved in art and music. They can become more popular with their work. And for conflict and power tests, obviously the Pluto trine is a big one. So that solar eclipse trine Pluto is about deep transformation in government. And eclipses in visible areas may see that there is local upheavals that's kind of rippling out. And the Saturn-Neptune challenge is about confusion in peace efforts and refining negotiations. But over the long term, you're going to see over the next 6 to 18 months, I think new efficient systems are emerging because old ones are breaking down, or we're realizing they weren't sustainable in the first place. And, you know, we want to be careful with any initial hasty decisions, because we're going to need to make a lot of adjustments because it's Virgo. And the Mercury trines are definitely really positive for lasting dialogue and, you know, enterprising honors and creating like wider networks. So rather than having like one person who's like running things behind the scenes, we're going to see a lot more of like certain, you know, branches of government that's like working interchangeably together, or they're communicating better. We're going to see like panels of people who are, you know, focusing on relationships. Rather than leadership kind of lacking and being behind closed doors, we're moving into a place where we're creating new systems where we actually are going to have better leadership. We're going to have more thorough practices. We're going to have more stability. It's just going to take time, and we're going to need to really open up the lines of communication and get everybody talking again, so that way we can kind of get to that point. Now, the Saros cycles for these eclipses are interesting. This is something that I haven't really spoken about too much on my YouTube channel, but I always do go back and I look at the cycles of eclipses. So basically, eclipses, they will have cycles where they start and they'll go for X amount of eclipses into the future. Some have been around for many, many, many years. Some are going to be newer cycles. But what I have found is that if you go back and you look at the Saros cycles that these eclipses are connected to, you'll see reoccurring themes that are kind of happening throughout those cycles. So for example, the September 7th lunar eclipse in Pisces, this is Saros cycle 128. And we're kind of halfway through the cycle. There are 71 total eclipses that are going to be a part of this cycle. So we have many that are still going to go into the future. This is number 41 of 71 events. And this repeats every 18 years and about 11 days. And the total duration of this particular eclipse cycle is about 1,262 years. It actually started in 1304. It will not conclude until 2566. Now, for the solar eclipse in Virgo taking place on the 21st, this is Saros Cycle 154. This is a younger series of eclipses. This is only number 7 of 71 eclipses that we will see total. This eclipse cycle actually started in 1917, and it will end around year 3179. It's mostly partials early on, and then they evolve into more like total eclipses. So what this means is that the Saroses are kind of like eclipses that have themes that will continue to kind of ripple throughout time. So we see these reoccurring patterns in fate, like family karma or global cycles that continue to repeat. And we know that we only have, the North Node in Pisces every 18 and a half, almost 19 years. South Node in Virgo, same thing. So you'll see some of the themes that are connected to some of these previous cycles. Now, how the cycles played out in the past, okay, is very interesting, especially when we look at the first eclipse, which is going to be the lunar eclipse in Pisces. I went and looked at this Saros Cycle 128. And in past total lunar eclipses that we've had here, remember it started, one of them started in 1917. Actually, I think that was the solar eclipses. But in 1917, we saw the World War I era and global upheaval. And then we saw in 1935, which was pre-World War II tensions that were escalating. In 1953, it was the post-war rebuilding. We saw the baby boom. We saw in 1971 major social revolutions, and then in 1989 we saw the Cold War end. In 2007 eclipses, we saw the financial crisis prelude right before 2008 collapse. So the themes have been about emotional releases during turbulent times and spiritual awakenings that come from the chaos, right? Now for Saros Cycle 154, which is the solar eclipse in Virgo cycle, we saw in 1917, there was World War I innovations, 1935, major economic shifts, 1953, major tech advances, 1971, cultural changes, 1989 was global connectivity. This was when the internet was just being born, for those of you guys who weren't around. And then in 2007, we saw major digital transformations, and the themes were tied to new beginnings in practical systems, often tied to conflict or crisis resolution. So I'm predicting we're going to see a lot of the same echoes of the past. I'm expecting society resets, innovation happening among uncertainties. Certainly the North Node is very uncertain, as is Pisces, and it's like, well, where is this going, And it can be very immersive. I think of like all of this immersive, viewing things through goggles and lenses and alternate dimensions and things that seem otherworldly and exploration, but also, do we lose ourselves in that? Like I think about just what has happened since the kind of the birth of the internet. I mean, not even so much cell phones, just the internet, and how our lives are now, for a lot of people are just totally, connected, whether it's email or Zoom calls, or even this, having a YouTube channel or creating a business and putting it online. How we have all become interconnected, which is great because now news can, happen in the flash of a second, and we can know what's going on across the world, and we can see images and all of that stuff, and we know what's happening. But also, are we losing ourselves? Are we losing that connection to our human nature? Are we losing what it means to know where our food comes from, sourcing it, having a connection with the earth? How has that had an impact on us physically? People are hunched over in chairs, right? They're not going out to work in the fields, or they're not going out to do manual labor like they used to. And how is that actually impacting us mind, body, and spirit-wise? So I think we're going to see some of that stuff that's going to kind of come through. Now, in terms of how this is going to affect the collective and us personally, essentially, I think that the lunar eclipse in Pisces is going to break illusions. And this is leading to unified empathy versus, the Virgo solar, which is really pushing for efficient, health-focused society. Potential for, healing division, but the Saturn-Neptune opposition is bringing this challenge to collective dreams with harsh realities. And it's going to, for some people, feel like, oh my God, this is like a dream killer. I think that with that connection with Castor, there's going to be sudden, changes that's going to be happening for people who are going to be really prominent in some of these areas, especially when it comes to like leadership and anything kind of connected to boundaries and, finally kind of like unleashing, like the truth. But it's good for artists and people creatively. Personally, I think the lunar eclipse, emotional releases, intuition spikes versus the solar eclipse, which is more about new routines and boundary setting. Look to the Mercury trines for innovative communication and thoughts and, transformation of personal talks and opportunity for friendship assistance. But with both of these eclipses, you can see them really playing out immediately to, 6 to 18 months down the road. I think the Virgo eclipse is going to have a little bit more legs in terms of like longevity. And the Pisces eclipse is just a part of a continuation of things that have already been happening. And now it's conjunct the North Node, and we can actually see with trines to Jupiter how it's providing better emotional care, how it's actually helping us kind of expand in the home, and how there's going to be much more of a focus in kind of receiving support so we can get better situated and grounded in a home or family or domestic kind of setting. Now, as for rituals for the eclipses, I'm just going to say this off the top of the video. I do not recommend in any way, shape, or form doing eclipse rituals, okay? Because they're wild cards. We're waiting for stuff to conclude. We're waiting for stuff to kind of start up. And because the eclipses represent something being obscured that we cannot see yet, or something coming or ending or beginning, we want to wait until after the eclipses, okay? I understand life happens. Sometimes we're like, we got to make a move now, or this just sudden thing just happened, but I don't recommend doing anything on the eclipses because that energy is chaotic. However, for the lunar eclipse in Pisces, Pisces is mutable and it's water, okay? So I think of baths, I think of working with oils, I think of meditation, spa days, soaking, being by the beach or by a body of water. Those are things that we want to integrate if we can. I'd be focusing on emotional release and also amplifying our intuition so we can use that to gain clarity with where we need to go. And I would use water elements for surrender. And you guys can include some of the themes of Castor, which is like obviously, occult rituals if you want to do it after the eclipse. And anything connected to like brotherhood or duality. So it can also mean like twin candles for duality, or it could represent that you're receiving support and you're kind of looking at bringing in 2 chalices of water, right? 2 seashells, like I'm taking, 2 ritual baths back to back in between eclipse seasons. Stuff like that can be kind of cool. And I would say that herbs that I would work with during the Pisces eclipse could be mugwort and jasmine. I love mugwort for baths and also for tea. It can be good for dream enhancement. And I like jasmine for like spiritual love and healing, and it's like very calming. Pisces is also really great for like lemon. So I like to use lemon for like cleansing or like baths as well. And if you like to use oils, I recommend using lavender because it'll kind of be calming first of all, but it's good for intuition. Sandalwood is really good for calming down any conflicts, but it's also good for higher realm access. And for incense, I like myrrh because it's good for purification and karmic release. Now, if you're a crystal or a rock hound, I would be using amethyst for spiritual clarity, moonstone for emotional balance, and aquamarine for flowing compassion. And for ritual ideas, moon gazing, I think especially if you have a bathtub or you have access to a window or outside, that would be kind of cool. And you can do that with your herbs and your oil. I would be burning some incense while journaling, charging crystals after the eclipse. I'm not recommending charging crystals the day of the eclipse. And I would meditate on North Node intentions for destiny alignment. And also there can be themes of purification, sacrifice, protection. Like that can be kind of coming up because Saturn is in the same sign as the eclipse. And once again, avoid doing exact work on the eclipse. Do it pre or do it post because you never know what you're going to get with the eclipses. And then for rituals for the solar eclipse in Virgo, I would be focusing on new beginnings. Obviously grounded intentions, so using, earth elements for practicality. Maybe incorporate, Mercury and Libra, themes for like balanced affirmations, relationship work, artistic writing. And I want to use fennel for this eclipse because it's good for discernment and protection, and also peppermint, which is really good for mental clarity. Now, if you want to use like oils or diffusers, I would use eucalyptus because it's good for healing routines and also purification. This is also important because cold and flu season's coming up. We're going to see a lot of people that I think are going to have issues with this eclipse. So eucalyptus, fresh eucalyptus in a shower, throwing some oil in a diffuser, putting some lemon, and some honey into your tea. I mean, this isn't like witchcraft. This is like, real healing. So these things can be beneficial. And I like frankincense for the incense because it can be good for focus and manifestation. As for crystals that I would be using, I would say carnelian is good for motivation to like get up and go. Peridot is good for communication and also growth. And then Amazonite is good for boundary setting. I think I would also add into this, what's the other one that I'm thinking of? Moss agate. That's really good for breathing or anything that's connected to the lungs. And then for ritual ideas, you could create a Virgo altar with like herbs and crystals and maybe like anoint with oils for intention setting post-eclipse. Smudging your space with incense, ground by maybe planting seeds symbolizing new habits. And because there's so many trines, I would say, you really want to have innovative ideas amid the oppositional challenges and maybe write short stories or peace intentions. You guys can be writing your intentions and like burning it, especially if you want to make a list of like everything that's been blocking you and then you're releasing it. Like do that after the eclipse. Right? Or just before the eclipse, the day before the eclipse, you can make a list of all the things that you have been feeling blocked and then you release it into, like the ethers. And remember that, solar eclipse energies is intense. So I would be focusing on, doing some of this seeding after the eclipse. By the time we're getting a couple days out after the eclipse, things are going to kind of balance out. And I want to see what happens because I know that both the solar eclipse is at 29 opposes Saturn. The Mercury opposition to Saturn is going to come up. And I think for a lot of people, we're going to still be dealing with some of the shakeout after the Pisces eclipse. And then we have to figure out a game plan suddenly, or we have to pivot when we get to the Virgo eclipse. So take your time. All right, now with that being said, I'm going to segue now into the 12 rising sign predictions for you guys. I got lots of info for how this is going to be impacting the 12 rising signs. As a reminder, I'm a Western astrologer and I like to focus on the Western system. I'm not a Vedic astrologer. I am going to be showing this to you guys from the perspective of the whole rising signs. So as a secondary reminder, you can use the whole sign system. It will be fairly accurate for you, but one of the eclipses is going to be at 29 degrees. So it's almost like the universe's way of saying, hey, complete this before you go into Libra. And also we're going to see the Pisces eclipse. That's going to be at 15 degrees. So it's halfway through the sign. So if you're a Placidus user, for the lunar eclipse in Pisces, go and find which house is 15 degrees of Pisces, where that eclipse is going to be. It might be in a different house. You might have to listen to a different sign. And then also, if you happen to be listening to the Virgo solar eclipse, pay attention because it's trying to get you to start something, and the ruler is going to be in Libra, which is going to be the next sign. So you kind of want to kind of pop over and look at what's happening one sign over, right? And with the Pisces eclipse, watch what's going on with the Jupiter trines. You guys will see the charts on the slide, so you'll be able to see all of the aspects that's kind of happening. I'm going to give you insight into, first of all, what's likely going to be happening for eclipse season in a nutshell. I'm going to talk about both eclipses, how it can manifest. I'm also going to talk about where your chart ruler is at the time of the eclipse so you can see how you're faring. And then I also have some tarot for you guys. So you guys are going to get a pretty well-rounded reading. So with eclipses, I always tell you guys, listen to your rising sign. I think the rising sign is very, very accurate, but we're dealing with solar and lunar eclipses, which means sun and moon. please listen to your rising sign, but also listen to your sun and moon sign. You guys can give me some feedback on this video. Let me know. I'd love to hear, you know, is your sun sign resonating more? Is your moon sign resonating more? Or is it your ascendant? But I have found that the eclipses really connect to our solar and lunar signs, so I would listen to all three. And you've got all 12 of them, so if you want to know what's going to happen for your kids or your spouse or, you know, your best friend or your mom, whatever, obviously you can kind of share the love and let them know what might be coming. All right, well, I'm going to start first with my Aries and my Aries risings and talk to you guys what is going down at the time of this eclipse season. All right, well, my dear Aries risings, the lunar eclipse is in your 12th house, and that will be in Pisces. And this is bringing, you know, obviously hidden emotional releases. So I would be expecting dreams revealing subconscious fears, you know, maybe really amplified by the North Node. For some of you guys, it might feel like a gentle flood is kind of like washing away isolation, leading to spiritual breakthroughs over the next couple of months. Now, Jupiter is the ruler and it's in your 4th house. And, you know, the Jupiter trine is adding some kind of philosophical or occult interests. It can also be, you know, giving you insight into your home or your family and connections to your lineage, where you come from, you know, relationships with ancestors, maybe emotional closures that's kind of happening in your home and family area. Versus the solar eclipse, which is going to be on the 21st, which will be in your 6th house of work and routines and health. Now, this is giving you an opportunity to really focus on setting new intentions here. However, the opposition to Saturn and Neptune is really challenging you when it comes to boundaries or tests or disillusionment in your daily dreams. I think with the trine to Uranus and Pluto, it's really, you know, sparking innovative job changes or new wellness habits. And with Mercury being in your 7th house also trining is bringing excellent opportunities for relationship communication, maybe negotiating better roles, or friends being some kind of aid when it comes to changes in your health or your career. Now, at the time of the lunar eclipse, you're going to see that Mars is going to be in Libra in your 7th house, and it's squaring Jupiter in Cancer in your 4th house. This means it's going to bring tension and action and expansion, and that there is potential conflicts in partnerships or philosophy. We are also going to see another minor aspect involving your sun, where there is minor stress that's initiating like new identity adjustments, where it is going to be making some uncomfortable angles. Personally, I feel like if this were me, I would be taking a step back. Like a full moon or a lunar eclipse in your 12th house is a really good time to be just resting and recuperating. Like you guys are going to benefit from meditating, resting, healing, you know, reorganizing your closets, your bedroom, doing some meditation, doing some hypnosis, right? Especially around emotional or home or family healing. Now, at the time of the solar eclipse in Virgo, which will be at 29 degrees, Mars will be at 29 degrees of Libra. Okay, so this is interesting because Mars is now at a critical degree, so that adds a double dose of changes. It will be quincunx, obviously, Uranus, and it's also going to be coming into a square with Pluto. So there's a lot of Mars aspects with the second eclipse, and what this means is that there's going to be unpredictable energy shifts and adjustments in independence. I think the square to Pluto is going to bring up power struggles and the opportunity to have transformative actions with intensity, particularly in relationships and goals. Now, the predictions that I have for my Aries rising, suns, and moons is that the Pisces lunar eclipse is going to bring an unexpected spiritual retreat or a potential hospital visit. I would be focusing on personally like spiritual retreat, meditation, like I said. There can be a release of secret enemies, and there can be philosophical insights leading to inner fame or some kind of change or transformation. You could be letting go of something in your home or something connected to your family identity. Now, fun tip, right? So if you know you're going to have a lunar eclipse in your 12th house, this is something that I learned a long time ago. If you want to avoid being like, oh my God, I'm not going to sleep well, or I'm going to end up in a hospital. And sometimes it's not even you going to hospital. Sometimes it's like, you know, you have a family member that bumps their head, or, you know, you got a kid that has a temperature, and then you're like, oh my God, eclipse, I'm in the hospital. The best thing to do, I would say, is to educate yourself and have some nice home remedies in your home with Jupiter in your 4th. And it would also be a really good idea that if you want to kind of invert some of these energies, something I've done when I've had eclipses in the 12th house is I've literally been like, I'm going to go to a local hospital, bring a book, bring my phone to catch up on emails, walk in, go to the cafeteria, get a cup of coffee, sit down, do some of my emails, or get back to people, read a book, and then I leave. So I'm like willingly going, okay, I'm going to do this energy. Or, it's a good time if you guys want to be traveling internationally, or if you want to be going on a retreat. It's a good time to be, working with a healer or a therapist, or to be working with a hypnotherapist. You guys can actually have a lot of breakthroughs here emotionally if that interests you. Anyway, in regards to the solar eclipse, this is going to be more about fitness routines, or maybe some changes with your office space, maybe a job offer or a change at work. Keep an eye on your pet health, and be mindful that there can be a major health revelation, like getting diagnostics or tests, or there could be work innovation. And I think that social negotiations are really going to be aiding any changes in your career. But overall for Aries, I think that this means there's going to be increased energy for hidden healing, sudden career shifts leading to empowerment, and friends that are supporting you while you're going through any of these challenges. Now, in terms of the cards that you get, or the card, I'm going to pull a card for each sign. The card that I got for you is the 10 of Wands. Okay, interesting. So how that correlates and connects to eclipses in your 10th and in your 6th house. Well, you could be feeling like, man, you're just like, the burdens are never ending. It's just like the responsibility, the duty, the stress, obligations, feeling kind of burnt out. I mean, that's kind of expected when you see eclipses. I think Aries and Libra are going to be feeling this. It does represent overcommitment, and I think the culmination of hard work that's leading to burnout. So I think for Aries, it's like a call to release what weighs you down. And, for the eclipse in your 12th house, it's kind of hidden emotional loads that are urging you to surrender, maybe unseen stresses like suppressed fears or spiritual exhaustion. And then you'll have the solar eclipse in your 6th house, which is going to be initiating practical unburdening through streamlining new habits. So this card is really tying to that axis, emphasizing Pisces kind of like illusion overload and dissolving into Virgo's more discerning efficiency. So I think you're releasing karmic baggage from behind the scenes struggles, and you're kind of paving for, lighter workflows. So expect a breakthrough in delegating tasks. So like, for example, if you've been, solo handling, family secrets, this could manifest as like therapy revelations leading to like a new health regimen, and freeing energy, I think, for some of your personal goals, right? Good luck, Aries. I'm wishing you a good eclipse season. All right, we've got Taurus and Taurus rising. What's up, Taurus? I hope you're doing well. Let's talk what's going on with this eclipse season in September. So first, you're going to be having the lunar eclipse in your 11th house of Pisces. And it's possible that you can see some illusions in friendships that begin to shatter. It can be, bringing karmic closures and truer connections. Obviously, Jupiter is the ruler. It's going to be trine, and it is in your 3rd house. So this means that it's going to be kind of nurturing, maybe group healing through compassionate causes. And obviously, there can be something new about communication with some of your friends and some of your networks. It can mean that you're bringing something new to an audience. So if you have websites, blogs, anything with media or communication, that can be a theme. And we can also see opportunities for traveling and friendships. Now, I do think that the second eclipse that we're going to be seeing, actually, let me go back. So there's going to be clarity in aspirations and releasing unaligned networks. And then the solar eclipse in your 5th house is igniting creative, romantic new starts. Which is great. So if you want to start a new hobby, you want to get back into dating, if there's big changes around children, if you're trying to get pregnant, if you're willing to take more creative risks, this is a good eclipse for that. Obviously, we will see that, Mercury is the ruler and it's going to be in harmony with Pluto, and it's also going to be in harmony with Uranus. And it's in your 6th house. So that means that it can be bringing up an emphasis in creating a new routine where you're working in, dating, you're working in children, or you're working in, having time for your hobbies, and maybe bringing much more of a creative flair to what you're doing in your career and also how you're making money. So what's going to happen here is Mercury is really helping you kind of get balance with expression, and Pluto is empowering any of these joyful transformations. However, there will be an opposition to Saturn and Neptune, so there's going to be reality checks on having fun and playtime and your creative abilities. But I think the trines are going to bring sudden artistic ideas and kind of deeper relational shifts, and it might actually bring you some popularity, believe it or not. Now, with the first eclipse that we're going to be having, we're going to see your chart ruler, Venus, during the lunar eclipse is at 15 degrees of Leo. So it's hanging out in your 4th house. So it might mean that, part of what's going on is that there can be social gatherings and get-togethers with family, that a lot of your goals are maybe tied to your home and family dynamics. Obviously, Venus in conjuncts or quincunxes the moon, so there can be one side of you that's like, I want to be home, and the other side's like, I have to go to this group or this meeting or, this collaboration with other people. So, there's a little bit of like a mixed bag there, but the positive is that we are going to see a trine that is kind of taking place amongst some of the other aspects, and this is definitely going to be positive. It's a bit of like a loose trine, but there is a loose trine to Neptune. So it can be great for harmonious creativity and kind of being more idealistic when it comes to love. And then we do see Mars is sextile Venus. So Mars is in your 6th house in Libra. And this brings smooth action in relationships and like changes to your daily routine. Now for the solar eclipse in Virgo, we are going to see that Venus will be at 2 degrees of Virgo. So Venus is going to be in the same sign that the solar eclipse is in. So I think that you're really going to be focusing a lot more on the solar eclipse. Obviously, this represents value resets and new beginnings when it comes to beauty and security, or what you enjoy, or a huge focus on your kids. But Venus is actually going to be coming into a square with Uranus in Gemini. So this means that there can be sudden changes in values and innovative themes that are happening in relationships, or where new hobbies are kind of sparking you to be more kind of unconventional with your money or your investment strategy, or taking risks. But there could be big risk, big reward. I just think the challenge overall is like that opposition to Saturn. It's a lot of like, well, what makes me happy, or what I enjoy doing, or what brings me joy. I don't feel like I can share that with my friends, or I don't feel like I can, bring that to a community. And so there can be a sense of trying to figure out how do you create and do things on your own if you're feeling like there is a blockage or a limitation in terms of a social connection. So I'm predicting for potential events and outcomes that the lunar eclipse brings a group project culmination or a friendship reevaluation. You can have a moment of social media fame or loss, and this is really about nurturing alliances that begin to form and bringing in people who can actually be better when it comes to communication, traveling, media, and learning. Now, the solar eclipse in Virgo can bring for some people a new romance. There could be just like a new person that you meet, but you're like, how do they feel about me? Do they want to be friends? Do they want something more? Or a friendship could potentially lead into a relationship, or a new hobby that could start. This is also a time of creative breakthroughs or child-related news. And obviously anything artistic is beneficial, so there can be some artistic popularity that can be coming up with something that you're creating. And I think with Venus being in that house, that's going to be a huge theme as well. Overall, for Taurus and Taurus risings, I think that you're going to see stronger alliances and artistic success in fun pursuits and financial or relational innovations. All right, well, let's see what the tarot says for my Taurus and Taurus risings. All right, the card that I get for you guys is the 9 of Coins. which obviously is going to be about, achievement, independence, success, leisure, material security, self-sufficiency. Great card, really great card, especially if you're focusing on all that pleasure with Venus in your 5th house and solar eclipse. I think this is also about abundance that comes through independence and enjoying the fruits of discipline effort. So it's, about refined luxury that is earned alone, what you build, what you create. I think with the eclipse in your 11th house of social networks and aspirations, it's signalizing like releasing codependent group illusions for solitary empowerment. And it's amplified by, kind of Pisces, more compassionate surrender. And then the solar eclipse in your 5th house of creativity and romance is going to be sparking this kind of like Virgo practical joy and self-expression energy. So the connection to the axis is interesting because Pisces dissolves the communal discrepancies or dependencies, allowing for much more meticulous self-reliance to bloom and like things that you can do on your own. So I think the eclipse energies are fostering, financial and emotional independence and turning social releases into creative abundance. Watch for solo ventures yielding some kind of reward. As an example, some of you guys are going to be ending, draining friendships with the Pisces eclipse, but it might lead to a new hobby like gardening in the 5th or cooking or writing. And it's symbolizing self-growth and prosperity and inner peace. So good card for you, Taurus. Let me know how it goes. For Gemini and Gemini rising, you guys are going to be feeling these eclipses as the first of my mutable signs. So make sure you keep an eye on the degrees. Anywhere around that 13 to 17 degrees will be the Pisces eclipse. Anywhere from, I would say, 27 to 29 degrees of Gemini, you will be feeling the Virgo eclipse, okay? Now, something to think about, obviously, is, your kind of eclipse in a nutshell is that the lunar eclipse in Pisces is in your 10th house. So it's going to be bringing career culminations and major revelations about your public image, what direction you're going in, and I think with the North Node pushing for some kind of fated recognition. The opposition that you're going to see to the Virgo sun brings tension versus, ambition and rest. But it delivers closure on outdated goals or outdated kind of career paths. And some of you guys might get, a new job. You might get a better position. You might get a raise or a change in your status. Some of you guys might be also selling businesses or retiring. I do think that there could be more philosophical interests at work, sudden opportunities for fame. And I would be expecting emotional highs leading to major philosophical shifts. And then the solar eclipse in Virgo in your 4th house is a complete reset when it comes to home and family. The Neptune opposition is testing your emotional boundaries, and it's going to be about illusions versus reality and where you're getting pulled into directions between, work demands versus needing to kind of clear house emotionally, move, or have changes with the family. So it can feel a little overwhelming. But the Uranus trine can bring sudden stability and innovation, and Mercury, your ruler, is going to be in a trine to Pluto and Uranus. So it's enhancing communication, and it's kind of aiding family dialogues and creating, innovative home ideas amid some of the Saturn restrictions. I think for the most part, when I think about, the eclipses, Mercury plays a pretty significant role in both of them. During the lunar eclipse, Mercury is going to be at 10 degrees of Virgo. It's in its home sign, and it's going to be coming into conjunction with the sun. So it may feel a little overwhelming with getting a lot of stuff done at home, or maybe it's about clearer thinking, kind of aligned with identity and being better organized and kind of like analytical revelations about home and family. That opposition to the moon means that there's tension in ideas versus emotions. It's like you're trying to be more grounded and practical at home, but you're feeling very emotionally overwhelmed about what you have to do at work. And then with the second eclipse that we're going to see, the solar eclipse that's going to be happening in Virgo, you're going to see Mercury in Libra, which is going to be trining you if you're an early degree Gemini. It's trining Uranus, which is going to bring innovative ideas and sudden mental breakthroughs, and it's trining Pluto for powerful communications and insights. So even in spite of that eclipse being difficult, Mercury's got some nice aspects, and it's going to be supporting you. I predict for my Gemini and Gemini risings that the Pisces lunar eclipse is going to be some kind of career peak or boss revelation, public recognition or setback for some people. This can be a turning point where some people are like, I can't stand my boss, I'm quitting, or I'm changing careers. But I do feel like some kind of new fame can emerge, and obviously Jupiter is the ruler here, and Jupiter is in your second house of money. So it means that many of you guys are going to get a better paying job, a raise, a boss is going to step down, or there's like a shift in philosophy about your worth and like knowing you know that you deserve more, and that's going to help you make the kind of change in a professional setting. Versus the solar eclipse in Virgo, I think for some of you guys it can mean there is home renovation, a family move, somebody moving in or out of your house. I also feel like with Mercury being the ruler and it's in the 5th house, some of you guys are going to be like, oh my God, we're having a kid, you know, or we've got a kid moving out, or we've got a relative coming to stay, or, you know, some of the changes going on at home are involving children or romantic partners of some kind. And so I could see the solar eclipse being more about just like family talks and negotiations, and also doing a lot of work in a sense of like inner child healing. And then overall, I think that the eclipses in the 4th and the 10th house are about professional clarity and like home life communication boosts, and also, you know, entertaining some kind of public gain. So I think that even in the midst of some of the chaotic things that are happening in your private life, there seems to be some really good things that are going to be happening in your career. So let's see what the cards say for my Geminis and my Gemini risings. All right, I get the King of Cups, which is interesting with the eclipse in Pisces, you know. So the King of Cups can be about a water sign. So it can be about, you know, Cancers, Scorpios, Pisces. It can be pointing to the Pisces eclipse being really prominent. And this is about being more wise, diplomatic, balanced, kind of head and heart. This is also, I think, about feeling very devoted, and it can be about a counselor or an advisor of some kind. Interesting. Well, the King of Cups he embodies like emotional mastery. So I could see this as compassionate leadership and an intuitive balance, maybe ruling feelings with wisdom without overwhelm, and feeling more emotionally in control with the eclipses in your 10th house. And, you know, the lunar in your 10th house of your career and public image, bringing revelations in professional empathy and kind of releasing some of these Pisces illusions of emotional detachment for heartfelt authority. Versus the solar eclipse in your home house is much more about Virgo's kind of practical nurturing of the roots. So Pisces fosters intuitive public flow. Virgo is going to be grounding it domestically. Maybe, you know, you'll channel this eclipse into more of like an empathy practice, and you're, you know, kind of balancing that into leadership, and you're going in the direction of, you know, healing career wounds for a stable home life, or embracing a new more spiritual or, you know, healing related, teaching related kind of career. So I would expect intuitive decisions yielding emotional security. So for like example, you know, a public role can expose vulnerabilities and it resolves into, you know, family harmony. So it could be something like mediating work conflicts to create more of a serene household. You know, are you bringing your problems from work home? Or are you taking your issues from home into the office and trying to kind of find balance and better master and manage your emotions seems to be the key. Good luck, Gemini. All right, we've got Cancer and Cancer rising. What's up, Cancer? I hope you're doing well. I'm excited to talk to you about the eclipses. Obviously, you're ruled by the moon, so that lunar eclipse is very personal for you, and you also have the ruler in your sign. So this is really exciting. I feel like, you know, with your chart ruler being the moon, that sun-moon opposition is bringing up for you emotional revelations versus practicality. However, you know, the 3rd and the 9th house axis can be about education, travel, you know, your belief system. I feel like that trine to Jupiter in your 1st house is very positive. I feel like this is about you adopting a much more positive philosophy about life. And this is also about nurturing your growth and having faith in yourself, being happy. This is also about being confident and being willing to kind of take risks. Versus the solar eclipse in Virgo, where the sun and the moon come together, and that's going to be in your 3rd house. is about new emotional starts and obviously identity alignment and how you communicate, how you learn. It could also be, bringing up some challenges through the opposition of Saturn and Neptune in feelings versus reality and boundaries. I think for many of you guys, what I'm kind of seeing is that there is likely going to be, travel, adventure, especially with Jupiter trine, or a shift in your beliefs, legal or educational revelation. And I think for the solar eclipse, we're going to be seeing that there's going to be some relational stuff going on. So kind of backtracking a little bit, I think with the eclipse trine Jupiter, the lunar eclipse, watch for, nurturing growth and faith and abundance and focusing on your health, okay? And also travel, education, publishing, legal matters can come up here as well. Versus the solar eclipse, where you're going to have the sun and the moon conjunct in Virgo in your third house, in opposition to Saturn and Neptune. I think that there can be some issues with relationships, particularly with lawyers, siblings, and neighbors. Some communication challenges. Obviously, you're the moon and Saturn represents your 7th house. So where a partner is traveling, where you're needing the advice of a teacher or a mentor or a lawyer, where you're having some delays or setbacks with moving or with traveling, that can obviously pop up. And that lunar eclipse, I think, is the best one. So, maybe you're going to be having a shift in your beliefs. Maybe there's some positive things happening with education, or there's going to be a trip or a ceremony or a graduation of some kind. But it's also good for publishing and keeping an eye out for new teachers. But the solar eclipse, can be bringing up a new learning course or sibling news, communication innovations. You can focus on peace talks, but it is possible that you can have separations in family relationships, long distance relationships, moving, and an emphasis on new vehicles. Legal documents might hit a snag or a delay. There can be delays with education and publishing here as well because of the opposition to Saturn. But I think overall, to me, this seems like there is going to be a lot of wisdom that's going to come from being more adventurous and traveling, clear connections, and if you're doing any kind of artistic writing, that can also be beneficial for you guys as well. So let's see what the cards say for my Cancer and Cancer risings. Okay, the card that I got for you is the Star card, which is interesting. So the Star card deals with hope, inspiration, positivity, faith, renewal, healing, and obviously rejuvenation. I mean, look, Jupiter rules your 6th house too. So Jupiter being in the 1st house is about you learning more about health, habits, service, and routines, focusing on better emotional health. And certainly with Jupiter trine Saturn, the right teacher, the right lawyer, the right person can come in and they can give you the necessary support that you need. It just depends on what you got going on in your natal chart. For me, I think the star really signifies hope and healing and divine inspiration and kind of pouring out renewal after a period of darkness. So it's kind of guiding you towards your authentic purpose. So with the moon in your 9th house of beliefs and travel, it's releasing outdated philosophies for kind of more of a Pisces spiritual faith. While the sun in the 3rd house is more about your communication in your mind, and it's sparking Virgo's practical sharing of insights. Now, the axis connection of Pisces and Virgo, I think, is going to be about inspiring universal hope, while Virgo is discerning how to communicate it daily. So the eclipses might bring renewed optimism, healing, maybe worldview wounds for clearer expressions, and maybe it's about inspirational messages that are kind of leading to growth. So some of you guys might let go of limiting beliefs, and you might feel inspired by a blog or a talk or a book on healing and attracting, supportive connections to help you do that healing, right? Anyway, hope that's helpful, Cancer. Let me know how this manifests for you guys. All right, we got Leo and Leo rising. What's up, Leo? This is going to be all about the eclipses that are taking place in the month of September. Obviously, we're going to be seeing these eclipses are very financial for you. So that's something that you need to know because they're taking place in your 6th and your 8th house axis. Special emphasis on the solar eclipse, as obviously you're ruled by the sun. So you're going to want to watch that. But what you need to know is that the first eclipse, which will be in Pisces, will be a lunar eclipse in your 8th house, on the 7th. And that is going to be about delivering intimacy, maybe insight into shared resources. Maybe it's going to be some kind of ending or closure or completion. Obviously, the 8th house represents kind of what's hidden. So this is really about healing deep wounds. And it can also intensify passionate connections. Now, it's ruled by Jupiter, which is in your 12th house, and it can mean that there can be some unexpected losses through travel or through loss. So you want to keep that in mind. But I think that this could be about an emotional kind of closure, or maybe like revelations in trust or finances can be a theme, because the inheritance aspect of, the 8th house does come through, but it's also joint finances, taxes, money owed, that kind of stuff. Now, the sun in Virgo and the solar eclipse that you're going to have later in the month on the 21st in your 2nd house is helping you reset values when it comes to security, practical abundance incoming. I like that it's going to trine Pluto, that will be in your 7th house of relationships, and also Uranus, that's in your 11th house of friends and networks. So I really feel like this is empowering a redefinition of your self-worth, right? And obviously South Node eclipse is in the 2nd. Yes, sometimes you guys could see that there is some kind of financial loss, or that you have to let something go, or you're selling something, or you're giving something away. That can happen. But I feel like the North Node and Saturn is really indicating that it's a period of you having to buy less, consume less, feel like you need more. Emotionally, spiritually, sexually, feeling like you also need other people to support you and kind of fill in the gaps, and you're not the one who's always kind of, picking up the tab. Now, it is possible that with the opposition to Saturn and Neptune, that there are challenges with financial illusions and boundaries are tested, particularly like security, password protection, make sure you're keeping an eye on your bank accounts, your transactions, who or what people have access to. Particularly if you're dealing with investments, or if you're traveling overseas, there can definitely be issues here. Sometimes I see a lot of like insurance claims under these eclipses, or I see things that go missing and then they have to get kind of replaced. So be careful here. And you're going to see a lot with, the sun coming into conjunction with the South Node, Mercury hitting the South Node, the eclipses, like you're already feeling some of the financial challenges. But now is a good time to go, well, what can I get rid of? What can I donate? What can I sell? And where can other people be more supportive of me while I'm going through this kind of transformational time, financially speaking? I do think that the trines that you're going to see between Mercury and also Pluto and Uranus is really good for negotiations and, more popularity amongst kind of like friends and other people who might provide you with some kind of assistance. So all in all, with these lunar eclipse that you're going to see, I think that this is bringing up identity versus emotional tension. And the conjunction with Mercury and the sun is more about aligning your thinking with your analytical self, versus the solar eclipse in Virgo, which is going to be having the sun and the moon conjunct, which is new self beginnings and a good time to start thinking about what you're manifesting when it comes to money, especially if you're trying to tackle debt or if you're trying to pay someone off or something down. And there can be some identity challenges with like structure and illusions of what is mine versus what is yours. But overall, I think that the lunar is going to kind of provide you with opportunities for inheritance, money coming in unexpectedly, an intimacy breakthrough, financial releases, psychological breakthroughs, finalizing loans, or paying off karmic debt. And dreams as well as ancestors can kind of come through to kind of support you, with Jupiter being the ruler in your 12th house. For many of you, this is also a really key time for some kind of healing, or, working with a therapist, or working with a psychic, or anybody who can kind of help like resolve any ancestral karma. It can be really beneficial here. And then for the solar eclipse, there could be a new income source or a new sense of self-worth shift that can be happening, a major value innovation, and friends might be aiding any financial negotiations. But overall, I think this is about emotional depth, financial empowerment, and your popularity increasing. Now let's see what the tarot has to say for my Leo and my Leo risings for the predictions on these eclipses. All right, the card that I get is the 8 of Wands, which is cool because this means we're keeping things moving, right? We're not getting kind of stuck. And this is actually a card of like movement, speed, progress, quickening, quick decisions, thinking on your feet, sudden changes, and excitement. So whatever comes in is going to come in very quickly with these eclipses for you guys. And I think about this and I'm like, well, rapid progress can be made here. Messages could be arriving quickly. There could be a lot of energy and motion towards your goals. The lunar eclipse in your 8th house might bring, some kind of release of emotional blockages for fast transformation. And then the solar eclipse in the 2nd house of your money really initiates that kind of Virgo practical momentum and self-worth. So, Pisces accelerates the subconscious shifts, and then Virgo says, okay, now I'm going to kind of ground into that physically or materially. And the eclipses hasten the abundance through decisive actions. So as an example, I'm like, all right, well, some like Leos or Leo risings might like release joint financial illusions, and it leads to rapid income boosts, like a sudden investment payoff, of some kind, or, suddenly there's money that comes in and then you're able to pay something off, or there's going to be a shift revolving around who you're banking with or what credit card company you want to be using. And you're like, wait a second, why am I paying so much more when I can transfer my balance to something else, and I can get a better interest rate? So I think that you're going to see that swift decisions are going to be beneficial for you in the long term. Just don't be doing it on the days of the eclipses, all right? Good luck, Leo. I hope it's good for you guys. All right, we've got Virgo and Virgo rising. What's up, Virgo? Well, you're the first of the 2 kind of stars of the show, so this goes without being said. Obviously, if you have any planets that are going to be conjunct or in opposition to these degrees, you're really feeling it. So we got the beginning, kind of around that 13 to 17 degrees, and then we've got the 27, 28, 29. So anything around that, you're going to have a conjunction or an opposition, so keep that in mind. But similar to Gemini, you're ruled by Mercury. So I'm going to be most focused on what's going on with Mercury, and we'll talk about what's happening. But we kick off first with the lunar eclipse in your 7th house. So that lunar eclipse in your 7th house is your opposite sign. 7th house is about really bringing partnership reevaluations and illusions, and with the North Node, kind of fading soul connections. And Jupiter is the ruler, which will be in Cancer in your 11th, and it's going to be trining this. So it means that you can get, some kind of sudden fame in, group relationships. It can deliver clarity in relationships. It can give you some kind of support in social allies to figure out relationship dilemmas. Relationships with friends can improve. And it can also mean that if you're single, if you're going out and you're socializing and you're kind of getting together, a friend can become a romantic partner that could set you up with somebody. Group dating events might be really good for you guys, going to like family barbecues and parties and stuff like that, or your friends' houses. You might meet someone. So if you're single, keep that in mind. But it goes without being said, having a lunar eclipse in your 7th house, if you've been in a relationship that has been established for a while, more of the eclipse can be about that other person. Doesn't mean there has to be something negative going on in your relationship. But I think of Pisces as like the temple, the church, where we worship. And at the 7th house with the North Node, Saturn, and the eclipse, it's like you kind of really putting an emphasis on, well, what does my other half need? And it doesn't mean if it's your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your client, your business partner. It could also be bringing in an astrologer into your life, a therapist into your life, somebody who is going to help guide you in a more emotional, intuitive nature. So it could be any of these people. Then we have the solar eclipse that's going to be in Virgo, which is going to be more personal to you because it's going to be in your sign. And this one's colorful because at least the solar eclipse in the 1st house reinvents you. And this is the first solar eclipse you've gotten in this sign. You've only had a lunar eclipse, which happened earlier this year. So now you can actually really hit restart. What this does is, I think it's reinventing you. Mercury is the ruler, and it is going to be in Libra in your 2nd house, helping you kind of balance out your self-image, your money, and your self-esteem. However, this is going to be at an anaretic degree. So, you got to watch your health, Virgo. You got to be very careful with health matters and making any sudden, hasty, changes. So I think of like, clothing overhauls, major cosmetic changes, major changes to your personal values, anything, connecting to health. Be careful here because I feel like you could try to do something impulsively and it may not be the best time to do it. You want to kind of think about it until early October. And that solar eclipse is connected to the South Node. So it's about, kind of challenges that you're having to release. Sun and Mercury are going to be close by, so it might mean that you have to let something go. So I don't know if it's like an old, outdated way of valuing yourself, if it's a material object, if it's a relationship. And obviously it's going to oppose Saturn and Neptune, which is kind of hanging around your 7th house. So this is challenges in identity and dreams with reality checks that are coming from other people. Thankfully, Mercury is going to be making trines, so I do feel like that can give you some, opportunities to kind of better connect and communicate, particularly, I think, in a professional or health sense. But I'm not as optimistic when it comes to the relationship stuff. I think a lot of Virgos are protected because Venus is in your 1st house, where some of you guys are going to go, well, I have to be willing to better myself for a partner, or I have to be willing to kind of let go of an old, outdated way of being so I can better relate to somebody else. But for others, the solar eclipse in your sign in opposition to Saturn means there's a separation, okay? And that somebody is not as willing to show up for you or how you need them to. So it may have you really reevaluating, is this who I want to partner with? Is this a good person for me? Does this work? And obviously it's, it's going to show you this over the next couple of months. It doesn't mean it happens this month. So when we kind of put it all together, I think that both of them, there's a lot of communication opportunities which helps you, and also sudden insights and like transforming the way that you communicate and you connect. But I think all in all, it's really going to be about how you're using your words, how you're communicating and connecting. And I think with the lunar eclipse, even though it's good for relationships, some of you guys might get engaged, you might get married, you might meet someone. There's going to be tension revolving around how you think and communicate versus how somebody else feels. And you might be trying to kind of like rationalize it when you feel like you're dealing with people who are irrational. And in terms of predictions for you guys, I would say for the lunar eclipse, obviously relational culminations or partner, reevaluations or revelations, public fame in some relationships can happen for you guys, or meeting someone through friends or socializing. Versus the solar eclipse in your sign can be a personal makeover or identity shift. Also, career honors can emerge. There can be separations in some relationships if diplomacy cannot be maintained. Some issues with children because it opposes Saturn, or financial disputes. Overall, relational healing is possible. Personal rebirth and refining your communications can be successful. Just try to keep in mind the balance between you and other people. All right, well, let's see what the cards say for you, Virgo. What do you need to know about this eclipse season? Wow, the card that I got for you is the Hanged Man. All right, so obviously the Hanged Man represents sacrifice, right? Waiting, uncertainty, lack of direction, perspective, contemplation. I think that this tells me you really got to wait until the eclipses play out to make any decisions. Don't be trying to make any game day decisions, because the Hangman represents surrender and trying to find a new perspective and voluntary sacrifice for enlightenment. That is the South Node in your sign, what you're learning from other people who can have a different perspective that you may not necessarily understand, but in this card, he's hanging upside down to see the truth. So the lunar eclipse in your 7th house of partnerships can definitely dissolve kind of like relationship illusions through release. And then the solar eclipse can have like a rebirth where you're more discerning when it comes to your intentions and your identity. So where Pisces demands letting go in bonds, Virgo refines with personal clarity. So I think these eclipses are encouraging you to kind of pause for insight, maybe a little bit longer than some of the other signs, and really transforming maybe codependency into an empowered kind of self-view. I do think there will be relational shifts with this card coming up, but it'll give you some inner wisdom. So some of you guys might go, well, it's time for me to suspend this toxic partnership, and that's flipping your self-perception in the 1st house, and it's leading to much more of an authentic sense of self, but also it can be boosting your clarity and also your confidence as well. So I hope that's helpful for you, Virgo. Definitely let me know how that manifests for you, sending you good vibes during your eclipse season. And we've got Libra and Libra rising. What's up, Libra? I hope you're doing well. Obviously, this is your kind of September eclipse overview. We're going to see a lunar eclipse in Pisces on the 7th of the month, and that'll be in your 6th house. which is really connecting to releasing over service in health or work. Okay, so letting go of perfectionism. There's an opposition to Saturn that is going to be coming later in the month, so that's definitely going to be a huge theme. But I think with like the Sun in your 12th house, it's really talking about rest and kind of like private time and like reflection and healing. And you know, the full moon in your 6th, I think with trines to Jupiter, which is in your 10th, can be really positive when it comes to self-care needs, being more productive, having breakthroughs at work. Maybe it's because you're communicating better at work. Maybe you have better health, better routines. Maybe you've hired an assistant if you need one. And there's definitely going to be a lot of growth that's going to come through your career as long as you're staying healthy, you're staying focused, you're staying organized. Then we look at the solar eclipse that is coming through, and I feel like it's building off of what happened with the Pisces eclipse. So you had some kind of intuitive spikes that came up in how to navigate your wellness routine. Then the solar eclipse comes through the 12th house, which is obviously sometimes a little jarring because it is behind the scenes and it's things you don't see coming. So it can awaken spirituality. That's the positive. But it's also ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is going to be in your sign. So if you are anywhere between 0 and 6 degrees of Libra rising, pay attention, because even though this eclipse is not in your sign, if you're an early degree Libra rising, it's conjunct your ascendant. So that means that there's about to be a significant change to your body, your appearance, or the way that people see you, or maybe a change with your morning routine. And then Mercury on your ascendant means that you're going to be translating some kind of secret knowledge, or you're going to be telling people things they didn't know, or you're getting ready to make an announcement. And Mercury is at a 5. So there will be some Libras and Libra risings that are going to get pregnant. So what you're going to find is that the solar eclipse is awakening something, but it opposes Saturn and Neptune. So there's going to be challenges revolving around boundaries and illusions. Now, Mercury in your sign will trine Pluto and Uranus. So I think that's good, where you could be very creative, you can have more enhanced kind of balanced, transformative, subconscious dialogues, and like there could be sudden intuitive breakthroughs, artistic abilities, and lots of opportunity to create. And I think that in order to have that creative energy, you need to be behind the scenes, you need to be resting, you need to be alone, so you're going to slow down a little bit. Now, at the time of the eclipses, we're looking at Venus. Right? So during the lunar eclipse in Pisces, you're going to see that Venus is in Leo. And obviously there's a pretty loose trine, but there is a trine to Neptune. It's all about idealistic beauty, compassionate relationships, and also sextiling Mars, which is going to be in your sign. So this means that the more you're taking action, you know, in love and socializing and connecting, you know, you're going to have fun. Now, on the solar eclipse in Virgo, Venus is going to be in Virgo. So it's in the same sign, but it's going to be in your 12th house. And the truth is like Venus does not do very well in Virgo. It does not do well in the 12th house for you either, because it means that you have to really watch your health. You have to make sure that you're taking time to rest and to kind of purify and heal. And not only is it in the same sign, but it's going to square Uranus. And that means there could be sudden value changes, innovations in love. There could be sudden changes in travel or education that can kind of come about here as well. Now, the predictions that I have for the Pisces lunar eclipse is a health routine release or work revelation. There could be new office spaces, new jobs, new health routines, some kind of medical results. Maybe needing to hire help, and there could be new pets or pet health matters that get kind of highlighted here, and how you communicate with people at work. And then for the solar eclipse in Virgo, especially if you're, I mean, all of the Libra risings, but especially if you're an early degree Libra, I'm talking like 0, 1, 2 degrees, pay attention, because this means that there is a need for spiritual retreat and rest, okay? And if you don't take time to be down, the universe will put you down. This is also about subconscious innovation. So therapy, healing, meditation, spiritual practices, hypnosis, finding ways to also let go of feeling like you have to be perfect, I think would be really beneficial. And it means that you need these meditation routines, you need rest, and that there can be very, very strong intuitive hits and dreams. And I would say write them down, because you will be tapping into something that might actually inspire you creatively. For the solar eclipse, I also feel like this is a time where you're really going to have to take a look at your health and your habits. You're either overdoing it or underdoing it. There could be more organization, work, and productivity, or there could be too much and you're having to kind of balance that out more with like rest and, you know, spending time in nature. But overall, Libra, this is about restful boundaries, subconscious gifts, and I think some kind of artistic, social success that's coming your way. So let's see what the cards say for Libras and Libra risings. What do they need to know for this eclipse season? All right, the card that I get is the Chariot, which is cool. The Chariot, this is a card that symbolizes, obviously, number one, using your intuition to get where you have to go. And if you can't see very clearly, using the stars or your intuition to guide you so you have a path forward, which is pretty bang on with, I think, Mercury in your sign. But this could be about success, ambition, obviously determination, willpower, control, self-discipline, focus, travel. For some of you guys, it's about traveling overseas or planning a trip or going somewhere, which you can see with the 12th house energy. But this is about victory through having a sense of willpower, direction, and balancing opposites, which you're seeing with the eclipses. Harnessing, I think, focus for triumph. And with that lunar eclipse in your health routines, you know, you're releasing daily chaos and you're surrendering. And with the solar eclipse in the 12th house, I think it's more about practical spiritual drive. So you're going to be taking the Pisces energy and balancing emotional habits with Virgo's more kind of hidden forces. I think that you'll conquer the eclipse challenges with determined balance as long as you're turning within to rest and you're turning wellness releases into intuitive victories. And I would anticipate some very purposeful inner journeys, right, with this placement. So, you know, maybe you're releasing burnout routines and it's propelling you to focus on, you know, meditation, and you're having a meditative breakthrough, like health win leading to spiritual clarity or better health habits or productivity because you're making time for rest and recuperation, right? So hopefully that's helpful for you, Libras and Libra risings. Let me know what manifests for you guys, sending you lots of good vibes during this eclipse season. All right, Scorpio and Scorpio rising, what's going on? How are you guys doing? This is going to be your eclipse predictions for fall 2025. Obviously, I'm focusing on your ruler being Pluto, but Mars is your co-ruler too. So, you know, keep an eye on Mars in your 12th house in Libra squaring Jupiter in the 9th. There can be this sense of feeling kind of like there's changes going on behind the scenes with education, travel, your personal philosophies or belief. And then we'll also take a look at what's going on with Pluto because there's some nice trines to Pluto. But Scorpio, this Pisces lunar eclipse is kicking off eclipse season. It's going to be in your 5th house, which is great. I think Scorpio rising is really going to like this because it's putting a highlight on, you know, culminations in creativity and romance and joyful releases. So relationship breakthroughs, falling in love, creative hobbies, being on stage. Certainly a lot of Scorpio risings might get pregnant because of the eclipse in the 5th house and Saturn and Neptune retrograding back into that house, or just a focus on children. And it's ruled by Jupiter, so it's going to be trining Jupiter in your 9th. So there can be opportunities for education, for traveling, obviously creative public affairs, and it brings lots of fun and pleasure and passion. So learning or traveling to things or about things that really bring you joy is going to be the focus. And then we're going to have a solar eclipse in your 11th house, Virgo, which is about innovating your networks, and it's about socializing friends and connections with other people. This is also about your overall long-term goals. Now, what's interesting is that this eclipse does trine Pluto, which is your ruler in the 4th house of home. So it can mean that there can be powerful support and alliances and a meeting of your goals where you're transforming your home and your family. Mercury, the ruler, is also trining Pluto as well, and Mercury is in your 11th house, so you can become more aware of what your personal home and family goals are, or connection with friends and family. The challenge here is that there will be an opposition to Saturn and Neptune. So something about your long-term goals, your social opportunities, your connections with other people, there is a limitation with Saturn and Neptune that are kind of dipping back into your 5th house, which means that there can be friends that can be assisting you, but there can also be the sense of recognizing or realizing what friendships are outdated or what you need to let go of or who you need to let go of or what's not actually bringing you joy. Now, your chart ruler during the lunar eclipse in Pisces, with both eclipses, Pluto is in Aquarius, it's not going anywhere. So we will see a semi-sextile to the moon, which can be subtle emotional transformations, but we also see that there is a square to Mars that's brewing, with both of them actually. So you're going to see that Mars in Libra is going to be squaring Jupiter in the Pisces eclipse. And then for the Virgo eclipse, you're going to see that eclipse trining Aquarius. You're also going to see Mercury in Libra that's trining Pluto in Aquarius. So that's good for, transformative communications, deep insights. But you will see Mars in Scorpio, or about to be in Scorpio. Mars is in the late degrees of Libra, coming into a square with Pluto. So that is going to be some power struggles. And I think it's going to be kind of like subconscious power struggles versus, oh, how do I tackle this challenge with home and family? How do I overcome this? What I predict for you guys is that the Pisces eclipse will bring creative project peak, major relationship or romance themes, philosophical fun, fame in fun or creative spaces, news around children, publishing opportunities, travel and romance opportunities as well. And then the solar eclipse in Virgo could bring a new group or friend invitation, and innovations in your friendships, or connections to new social groups, and your friendships are going to transform, and you could get recognized for stuff that you're creating or working on, but you may feel like it's lacking getting the full support or getting the full recognition or the credit. I think is going to be a theme where credit is due. And it is putting an emphasis on connecting to an audience with new life goals that are emerging. Now, overall for Scorpios, this is about artistic abundance, social empowerment, and friendships that can be kind of aiding in some of the changes that you're going through, and a reevaluation of friendships as well. All right, so let's see what the cards say for Scorpio and Scorpio risings. All right, and that is the Temperance card. Okay, I'll take it. Good card, I think, to be kind of pulling, especially when I think of like Pisces, which is like that kind of like alchemy, mixing and magical type of stuff. So balance, peace, patience, moderation, calm, tranquility, harmony, and serenity. These are the themes that come up with Temperance. This is really illustrating moderation and alchemy and harmonious blending, which we want to do when we see some of the trines to Pluto and also, some of the oppositions to the 11th house. It's about mixing elements for healing equilibrium. So having that Pisces eclipse in your 5th house, I think, is like releasing, passionate excesses. And then the solar eclipse in the 11th house is much more about, starting a much more kind of like practical social connection. So Pisces is kind of tempering joyful illusions, and Virgo is refining collective visions. So I predict for you guys that the eclipses are kind of fostering more balanced passion and alchemizing fun into meaningful alliances. So I would expect maybe like moderated creativity yielding community harmony. Maybe this is about kind of tempering dramatic romances, and that's blending into supportive networks like, artistic moderation, attracting collaborators. And taking what you've created and sharing it with other people, and also like not feeling like you're going to determine whether or not you're good enough, creative enough, or successful enough as to whether or not you're getting recognition for other people. You're going to notice that there's going to be connections or friends or opportunities to connect with people who are going to see you for how amazing you are, and not to be like chasing the attention of certain groups or individuals. I think that's going to get kind of highlighted here as well. Obviously, if you've got anything that's going to be around that 14, 15, 16 degrees of Scorpio, you will be experiencing a trine from the Pisces eclipse and also from Jupiter. So I think you guys are really going to like that eclipse. It seems like you're just trying to find the balance between your own happiness and how you connect with other people. Take your time, right? And there can be a lot of healing when it comes to connections with others, or healing your, community connections, or joining a healing community, right? Like going to like a meditation class or a yoga class, or anything that's going to be about finding support from other people who may be going through some of the same challenges. That could be addiction-wise, health-wise, or whatever, so you feel supported. Good luck, Scorpio. All right, we've got Sagittarius. What's up, Sag? Obviously, you're going to be feeling the effects of this being a mutable sign. So if you've got anything that's around 13 to 17 degrees of Sagittarius, you're going to feel the squeeze from the Pisces eclipse. If you've got anything around 27 to 29 degrees of Sag, you're going to feel the squeeze from the Virgo eclipse. But the positive here is that Jupiter really gets highlighted during the Pisces lunar eclipse. And, obviously Jupiter is your ruler. So something to think about is that, Jupiter is in your 8th house, which is going to deal with pretty significant, dramatic, emotional home, family, or joint resource changes. What abundance and what emotional support or intimacy connections you have with other people. Now, the first eclipse is going to be a lunar eclipse in Pisces in your 4th house, which is obviously kind of showing where there's like peaks happening in home and family emotions. Maybe ancestral healing, and obviously the North Node is there, so it's really deeply rooted in your home and family destiny. So if you're meant to move, if you're meant to relocate to a foreign land, if you're meant to move back home, if you're meant to take care of a parent or deal with a home or family estate matter or a joint finance matter, this can come up. I also think that, when I look at Pisces, it's going to be about compassionate closure. So if you have to say goodbye to a relative or a home or a living situation, that could definitely come up as well for some people. Versus the solar eclipse that's going to be happening in your 10th house, where you're getting another dose of, being able to take action at work. And this is about, addressing any career concerns like immediately and in a very bold fashion. Now, yes, with the solar eclipse, some of you guys can be changing jobs, quitting jobs, making a big announcement, retiring, launching a new business, but I would say pump your brakes because the solar eclipse is in the 10th house. It's got the ruler Mercury in the 11th, where there could be some support coming from friends and allies. However, it is going to be opposing Saturn and also Neptune, and Saturn's hanging out in your 4th house and Neptune's retrograding back in. So it's about navigating, the challenges that are kind of coming up or the changes coming up professionally and your professional dreams with like the reality of what's kind of going on at home. I think that the trines really kind of tie in where friends and partners can support you as you go through this, and there could be lots of good career dialogue and connections to clients, and you could get some recognition. But I want to remind you guys that this is a critical eclipse and it's a southern eclipse. And so a lot of my Sag and Sag risings are like, I've been putting off making a job change or retiring or, giving up my position or been delaying launching my business or staying home and being a parent. And you're going to see with that opposition that it's going to be like, well, what has to go, right? Does it need to be putting career in the back burner, focusing on home and family, Or does it mean that you have to go full steam ahead and figure out how you can kind of change your home situation, work from home, take care of parents, and then, continue to kind of keep things going. So you're going to have your hands full. The positive is that Jupiter in your 8th house is telling me change can be good and that you could actually receive support from other people. So when I look at the lunar eclipse taking place in Pisces, obviously that eclipse trines the moon, so it could be good for expansive emotional growth. However, Jupiter squares Mars, where there could be some tension going on in faith and action. And then we have the second eclipse in Virgo, which is going to be putting Jupiter still in Cancer. Now it's kind of sextiling the Virgo eclipse. It's wide. It's about 8 degrees, almost 9 degrees, but it's sextiling. So emotional changes around career and finances, and a semi-square to Venus, which brings up minor value tensions as well. And then in terms of the, potential outcomes, I think for like the lunar eclipse in Pisces, a family revelation, a home shift, selling a house, buying a house, moving, some kind of change going on in the family or inheritance matter or tax matter or joint financial matter, dealing with property. And there could be speculation losses when it comes to home and roots, money from real estate or joint finances, and potential inheritance. Versus the solar eclipse, for some of you guys, it will eventually manifest as a career launch or a public kind of like change or innovation or status change. You can get good honors, like you can gain some recognition for what you're doing at work, but you're going to find that it's really difficult in balancing what's going on with your career and either your home or your emotional habits, because Saturn and Neptune going back on your 4th house is like, ugh, you know, I'm feeling really low, or there's a lot of things changing at home, or there's things that I'm needing to kind of prioritize emotionally before I put myself back in action. And you will see over the next like 6 to 12 months, lots of changes in terms of your career. Some of you guys might change directions altogether. Now, this can be overall good for, you know, bringing about family peace, taking professional leaps of faith, and obviously having major transformative dialogues when it comes to home, career, and joint finances. So let's see what the cards say for Sagittarius and Sagittarius rising. All right, the card that I get for you guys is the 7 of Cups. And I was waiting for somebody to get this card because I was like, the Hangman's going to come up for sure. We're also going to probably see, you know, the 7 of Cups and maybe the World card. But here it is. So this is a card that is about choices. It's also about searching for purpose, working through illusions, fantasies, daydreams, wishful thinking, and indecisiveness. So Sagittarius, you know, when I think about this card coming up, it's like, well, you're having to figure out like what is sustainable and what is potentially like fantasy or a pipe dream, you know, and it's about kind of sifting through these illusions and fantasies and making choices and having a difficult time discerning reality from dreams amid some of the options. With that lunar eclipse in your home zone, it's going to release a lot of like almost like mirages in regards to where you could live, how you could live, what's going on with your home situation, which is kind of wrapping up and concluding over the next couple of months, versus that solar eclipse, which is about really initiating more like practical ambition when it comes to your career. Now, it's a southern eclipse, so some of you guys might go back to old ways of working or old jobs, but I think this is going to be a time where, you know, it's exposing home illusions, and the Virgo energy is going to help you discern, okay, now that things are changing on the home front, now what does this mean for my career, you know, or where I'm living or for my family? And I think that, you know, eclipses do clarify confusing options, so it can mean that you're working your way out of feeling confused, and it can really help you kind of ground into your family dreams with new career realities. But watch for focused choices, I think, leading to opportunity for success. Instead of being wishy-washy or all over the place, pick one, stick to it. So for example, you could like dissolve family fantasies, and in getting realistic about where you're going to live, how you're going to live, or how you feel, this will sharpen your public kind of goals and your ability to show up at work. And, you know, this could mean that you're choosing a stable job over a pipe dream, right? Or that you're going, it's not realistic for me to be working this much right now. I've got a baby, or I've got a mom to take care of, or I've got a house to renovate. And you're going to have to kind of come to terms with what actually has to change. You're one of those signs that I would say you would actually benefit from really waiting until these eclipses finish up before you make any big decisions about what's going on, because I think that you're one of the signs that's going to be like, I can't focus on work until I deal with this emotional home or family matter. And you'll see that kind of unfold over the next couple of months. Okay. Good luck, Sag. Let me know what happens. All right. We've got Capricorn and Capricorn rising. What's up, Capricorn? How you doing? Obviously, you're ruled by Saturn, so the second eclipse is going to be pretty prominent for you. We're going to talk about that. But the first eclipse, the lunar eclipse in Pisces, is going to be taking place in your 3rd house of the mind, or anything connected with communication, traveling, siblings, learning, you know, websites, podcasts, anything connecting to media. You know, there's going to be a huge focus here. And this is all about your mindset. And I think a lot of it's about releasing limiting thoughts. Now, Jupiter's the ruler. Jupiter's in your 7th house of relationship, which is through trines going to expand communication and intuition. So I think that you can communicate better with siblings, communicate better with family, communicate better with partners, therapists, vocal relationships, maybe traveling to meet people can be a theme. And I think that there's going to be clearer ideas as a result of what's expanding and growing in your relationships. Versus the solar eclipse, which is going to be in your 9th house, which is meant to expand your beliefs, can have you thinking about going back to school, publishing something, learning something, traveling, And this one's going to be kind of tricky because it is going to oppose Saturn, which is your chart ruler, back in the 3rd house in Pisces. And I think you're going to see that the challenge is going to be, you know, feeling a little restricted when it comes to your dreams. Positive is that you've got a couple months to work through Saturn and Neptune in your 3rd house to kind of work this out. Travel a little bit before you figure out where you want to move or where you want to land. Or maybe it's a time that you're going back to school. You'll also see Mercury, the ruler, in Libra, and it's going to be coming into a trine with Pluto in your money house and Uranus in your daily work routine house. So some of you guys might actually be traveling for work, going back to school. There could also be learning new skills, or there could be certification or training that could help kind of improve your financial or your schedule or job. I think just the opposition of Saturn and Neptune can bring some illusions. And even though there could be some sudden, you know, powerful mental shifts and insight, watch for the illusions and challenges and blockages in being able to travel or connect or communicate. Now, during the lunar eclipse, you know, you're going to see that there will be obviously some positive trines between the moon and Jupiter. So that improves communication. Saturn is still retrograde at 29 degrees, so it's already highlighting some of the themes that will come up during the solar eclipse in Virgo. And then that solar eclipse is going to be in opposition to Saturn. Saturn is still sextiling Pluto, so the more that you're rethinking how you communicate and, you know, what you believe in, it can change your self-esteem. It can also help change something about your health and your daily habits. So that's something positive to look forward to. And Jupiter and Saturn are kind of in harmony in both of these. It's almost better during the solar eclipse in Virgo, where Jupiter is now, it's still wide, but it's still kind of coming into a trine with Saturn, so it can improve communication with other people. I would say overall, you know, watch for some of the major boundary setting, some of the challenges that can kind of come up karmically with Saturn at 29. This is about, you know, trying to structure your dreams, but being realistic. And kind of, I think with some of the Neptune conjunction stuff also, it's about being like more disciplined when it comes to your illusions. And you're going to find that something that you once thought or you believed or you learned might be kind of changing. And the lunar eclipse in Pisces can bring a communication breakthrough or some kind of sibling news. Success online with writing, you know, traveling to meet partners. There could be moves and also new vehicles that can come in. However, I don't recommend buying a vehicle or signing a contract or, you know, traveling during the eclipses. And the solar eclipse can also bring travel or study innovation, total transformations to your belief, as well as opportunities for peaceful gains, and legal or communication issues are possible. But overall, I think the eclipses are bringing you more mental freedom, learning from your adventures, and powerful personal insight. So let's see what the cards say for Capricorn and Capricorn rising. Oh, wow. Okay, so the card that you guys get is the High Priestess. I love that for you. I think that's wonderful. The High Priestess is definitely about tapping into your intuition, which is kind of cool with Saturn and Neptune coming back into your 3rd house. Intuition, mystery, spirituality, higher power, you know, inner unconscious voice that's kind of coming through. And, you know, Saturn and Neptune going back into your 3rd house, you guys would benefit from like intuitive journaling, right? Reading tarot cards, working with a pendulum, something that's going to give you some kind of feedback or advice that can confirm what your gut is already telling you. But the High Priestess embodies intuition. She's about mystery and, you know, inner wisdom. And this is about guarding secrets and trusting the unseen. So it's almost like you're kind of like leaning more on what your gut is telling you than like what you're supposed to believe or what you're being told. And I think with the lunar eclipse in your 3rd house, you're releasing that mental fog for clear, like intuitive insights. And then the solar eclipse in the 9th can be more about, you know, more kind of practical Virgo-like, you know, traveling and scheduling and philosophical quests. So Pisces will be unveiling the subconscious thoughts, and then you'll discern them through some of the Virgo transits. And I'm predicting that the eclipses actually for some Capricorns might awaken hidden knowledge, transforming vague ideas into like wide expansions. And I would expect mystical messages that are guiding your growth. And watch for like releasing scattered thoughts and feeling like suddenly now there's going to be this intuitive inner guidance for how to travel, where to go, what to study. And there could be, because of that intuitiveness that you're tapping into, almost like learning or communication breakthroughs that can happen, right? So hopefully that's helpful. I would also say just watch, because the sun does deal with other people's money, for some back and forth revolving around legal documents that need to be signed, or travel expenses, or needing to deal with like legal matters that might be like costly. That can definitely come up for some of you guys, so watch for that. But good luck. Let me know how that opposition to Saturn manifests for you guys, and what the challenge is, and how you're able to communicate your way through it. All right, we've got Aquarius and Aquarius rising. What's up, Aquarius? How you doing? We're going to be talking all things eclipses. What you need to know is that they're on the 2nd and the 8th house axis. So this is very financial for you and Leo this month. We have got, first up, a lunar eclipse in Pisces in your 2nd house on the 7th. And that is going to be about releasing values and dealing with security. Okay, so lunar eclipses are conclusions or completions. Likely you'll be redefining your worth. There can be opportunity for reinvesting in yourself, your wealth, your daily routine, your health, your pets. And I also feel like this is about eating healthier and feeling more abundant, emotionally abundant, and feeling like more secure, which is interesting because like Saturn's going back into this house too. But I think that where you've been more cautious and conservative or budgeting, now it's going to start to pay off. Now, this is also about intuitive abundance. Okay, so think about that, where you're navigating your finances intuitively. Obviously, this is going to be trining Jupiter, which is in your 6th house, which is why I think it might be tied to how you're, investing more money in your health or your pets or in healthcare, in your emotional well-being. Maybe you're spending a little bit more money on your office space or kind of improving your day-to-day routine. And then we have the solar eclipse, which is going to be in Virgo, which will be in your 8th house, which can deepen intimacy. That's the positive. But it does oppose Saturn. So being somebody who's traditionally ruled by Saturn, it's going to be a lot of like surprises with other people's money, or there could be sudden endings or unexpected changes. There can be losses, obviously, touch wood. And this is a little bittersweet because it does oppose Saturn. So there's a lot of like, well, what am I supposed to put in? And like, what are other people contributing? Or what do other people want? Or what bills are coming due? But it also has the ruler, Mercury, in the 9th, trining Pluto. So it tells me that you're going to have likely like somebody who's giving you like a guide or a mentor or even like a reader who's saying to you, like, embrace transformation. It can be good. Invest the time or the money. Go back to school. Go on the trip. Pay for it. It's going to be worth it. And it's all about that change in your mindset. Now, I also feel like the trines to Uranus brings new innovative dialogues and, transformation in how you talk about joint finances. Watch out, though, for Saturn's boundaries when it comes to, how much money you're sharing with someone. There could definitely be some delays or some blockages with financing, investments, loans, that kind of stuff. If you're dealing with a tax or an inheritance issue, or if you're dealing with a settlement when it comes to other people's money, child support, spousal support, that stuff, that can take a little bit of time. There could be a delay. I like the trine to Uranus. I feel like especially with the eclipses, with the lunar eclipse, you're going to see Uranus is technically in a sign that is friendly with Mars, so that is giving you the opportunity to focus on taking action and getting in balance. But it is in, a semi-square with Neptune, so that means that there can be, minor kind of issues and illusions that are coming up. And then the solar eclipse that you're going to have in Virgo, it does obviously feature Mercury trine Pluto, which is good for insights and communication and travel. It also is going to be featuring a semi-square to Neptune, so there could also be some minor issues that can kind of be coming up with dream disruptions. Now, overall, I would say the predictions for Aquarius and Aquarius risings is the lunar eclipse will bring a financial release or a value revelation, and there can be speculation losses, so be careful here. Unexpected payouts and expenses relating to health and work. And the solar eclipse is about intimacy or inheritance innovation, investments even. It can be about friends aiding transformation. Sudden financial separations can happen, and travel or education expenses are likely. But overall for Aquarius, I would say this is about abundance of intuition, profound connections, and also entertaining gains that have been long overdue for you guys, in my opinion. Now let's see what card comes up for Aquarius and Aquarius rising. What insights do you have for the eclipses this season? All right, 10 of coins. Sigh of relief. Good card. This is a card that deals with, well, obviously long-term wealth, legacy, family, long-term stability. So this is a card that's about building like enduring abundance. And I think that you've made a lot of sacrifices with Saturn and Neptune in your money house. You know, they're going back here briefly for another couple months, but I think that this eclipse is really kind of showing you with trines to Jupiter that you're like, okay, there are some things worth investing in, you know, and it's maybe worth hiring people or expanding things, or now I've got the capabilities, or it's important to invest in myself or my health. That lunar eclipse about values and security is going to shatter any illusions that you've had about, you know, lack of self-esteem or, you know, positive self-belief. It's going to help you rebuild your self-esteem stronger and know your worth. And the solar eclipse in your 8th house is about shared resources and transformation. So it's going to be about legacy building, investments, inheritance, you know, setting up investments or long-term financial planning, or money that you're passing down, or money that's owed. And I think that this is about really teaching you that you're surrendering any material attachments and you're really focusing on joint prosperity. So I predict that the eclipses are really solidifying foundations and turning value releases into transformative wealth. And I anticipate, you know, there could be some family legacies or financial security that's kind of becoming a huge focus. So for example, maybe you're letting go of like insecure possessions, but you're building shared investments like inheritance resolutions, yielding stability, or taking money that you've made and investing it into something long-term but not touching it. That can be some of the stuff that can be coming up for you guys. And what a great card in the midst of what can feel like what's been a really turbulent time when it comes to finances. So good on you guys. Let me know how that manifests. And we've got Pisces and Pisces risings. You are the other star of the show. So obviously if you've got anything between, I would say 13 and about 17 degrees of Pisces sun, lunar rising, the lunar eclipse will impact you. And if you have anything that's going to be around, I would say 27 to 29 degrees of Pisces, the solar eclipse is going to oppose that. So you're going to want to watch those degrees. Pisces, you know, obviously the lunar eclipse is like all about you. So that lunar eclipse being in your sign, what it's doing is it's really revealing your true self. And the North Node is there, so it's about intuitively tapping into your emotions and embodying them and who you are. Obviously, you are ruled both by Jupiter and Neptune. The positive is that this trines Jupiter in your 5th house, so there could be opportunities for pregnancy, creative completions, feeling fulfilled, feeling joyful, feeling very artistic, and like having fun and being able to kind of paint and dance and create. The challenge is that even though it trines the North Node and the Moon, Neptune is your co-ruler and it's retrograding back into your 1st. So there's a lot of what do I want to create, but do I believe in myself, but do I have the money, but, you know, can I make it happen? Then you're going to be seeing for the solar eclipse that's going to be happening in Virgo, after the personal kind of evolution that you've been going through, the solar eclipse is now resetting your partnerships in your 7th house. This is challenging because a solar eclipse in the 7th oftentimes brings a lot of things going on with other people, not so much with you. And planets are going through the 7th house and they're hitting the South Node. So there's a lot of clearing out old relationships, finalizing things, maybe hearing from the past. People from the past can come back, but there can be like untangling yourself in clients, relationships, changing therapists, changing readers, you know, and you're like, I got to let some people go and just listen to my gut. And intuitively, I'm feeling like I got to go in a different direction. So that will also oppose Saturn in your sign, which is, I think, going to make some of you guys go, well, I'm not putting up with people's behavior anymore, or somebody's really interested in me, but I don't know how interested I am in them, or you know, they want to connect with me, but I don't know if I want to connect with them. And you could be feeling like there's a need to kind of distance yourself. And Neptune's there as well. So it's about really kind of looking at relationships realistically and being like, okay, is this a healthy bond? And it's going to be about your dreams and your goals versus, you know, restrictions, limitation of other people. Thankfully, communication can be better, although I think the communication is going to be more about other people being more kind of matter of fact, and you're just more emotional and you're not kind of speaking the same language. And I think that there can also be opportunities to kind of communicate with the Virgo eclipse what's concluding and what's coming to an end. And so that can bring about changes in joint finances, your home, you know, and it's a period of major reevaluation where you're like, this person is now leaving my life, or, you know, this person is now coming back into my life. Do I want this? Is it working? So it's going to be interesting. I think that there is definitely, you know, a need to be very in tune with yourself going into these eclipses, because when you see the lunar eclipse, what's going to happen is, you know, Neptune is at 1 degree of Aries, which thankfully is a wide trine. It's trining Venus. You know, the eclipse is also trining Jupiter. But you're going to see some squares to Pluto, and that means that, you know, you can be compassionate and idealistic and beautiful, but if there are, you know, power struggles coming up, or, you know, tension in relationships, that's going to be a bit of an issue. And then for the solar eclipse, obviously Neptune is now at 0 degrees. You know, Jupiter is now slightly sextiling the solar eclipse. So we do see oppositions, which brings dreams versus reality challenges. And then we see squares to Pluto, which can bring some, once again, power struggles. I think overall, the predictions I have for you guys is that your lunar eclipse in Pisces is about a personal revelation or identity shift, you know, a glow up. It can also be about some kind of like philosophical fame, creative births, new hobbies, romance, pregnancy. All of these things are possible, or just feeling very creative. And then the solar eclipse can bring for some people new partnerships, you know, bond innovations, social success, hitting restart on an existing relationship. Partners from the past can come back here, but I don't know if you'll want them with the opposition of Saturn. And there can be separation in some partnerships, but new health coaches, therapists, readers, other people can come in. And this is a time where you might have an overabundance of, you know, partnership opportunities, but you don't know if you want them. You might have a lot of clients that want to work with you, but you might not be filling up to it. So you need to really balance out your boundaries and your goals, and not let other people kind of railroad you into working together or being together in some way if it just doesn't feel right. But overall, I think you're going to have a sense of self-clarity. You know, relational harmony can improve, and I think you're going to have some assistance that are coming from friends that can help remind you of your goals, and where it's a good idea to prioritize yourself and not always fall back into the same patterns in relationships. Pisces, I'm excited to see what happens for you guys. Let's see what the cards are kind of saying and what you should be expecting for this eclipse season. All right, the card you get is the 6 of Swords. I'll take that. I'll take that. This can be a card that's about moving on. So you're like, I have moved on from, you know, where I was 6 months ago or a year ago, or look at how much I've evolved, or look at how much happier I am, or how much more peaceful I am. But it can also mean you're moving on from certain relationships. And this is a card that's about, you know, departure. So it could be also about traveling or actual moves. Certainly Uranus in your 4th house can be suggesting that. Accepting lessons, some kind of distance, or leaving something or someone behind. So this is a card of transition, and this is also about healing journeys. So it's about kind of reflecting on where you've been healing and working on yourself for the last 6 months or so. Maybe leaving troubles, you know, for calmer waters. And obviously the 1st house is about identity illusions, and then the solar eclipse is partnerships. So there is like a lot of like practical relational voyages that are kind of going on. I think that the Pisces eclipse is more about self-surrender, and then the Virgo eclipse is like about, okay, I can only partner with some people if the bond is balanced. Otherwise, I have to move on from this. So I think the eclipses are guiding you from personal chaos to kind of more harmonious connections, or a time that's better to connect with people once you've kind of gotten back into sync with yourself. I do think this card does indicate that there could be much smoother transitions that's yielding peace. So if you're releasing old self, you know, patterns with the eclipse, that can happen. And then that's helping you sail towards supportive relationships, like, you know, therapy, aiding, partnerships, healing. But it can also mean the more that you become in tune with yourself and you're prioritizing your peace, you're like, there's nothing to fix here. Like, this relationship is a dead end, or this is broken, or, you know, now I have to move on. And now I'm suddenly throwing myself into finding a therapist, or coming around to the idea of maybe it's not the right time to date. Maybe I need to work on myself, and there will be somebody in the future. So a lot of it's getting in tune with yourself first before you kind of make some of these, journeys forward. So I hope that that's helpful for you, Pisces. Definitely let me know what happens, how that manifests for you. And I would say for all the 12 signs, remember, it's going to take anywhere from 6 to 18 months to see a lot of this stuff kind of develop. So you don't always see it right off the bat, but you will start to see it unfold over time. Now, with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching my webinar, for supporting my work. I really appreciate it, especially to those of you guys who, continue to take my webinars or my courses. Definitely follow my work if you want to see more on these eclipses over the next month or so. You guys can follow me on X at BTV Astro, or you can see me on YouTube at Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. But for more of me and my work, my courses, or if you want to book a personal reading with me and find out what these eclipses mean for you, check out my website at beyondtheveiltarot.com. There you should sign up for my newsletter so you're on the lookout for when I have new courses and programs that are going to be coming out in the future. And I'm wishing everybody a super amazing, beautiful eclipse season. Even in spite of some of the challenges, I feel like there are so many opportunities to kind of get things in order and have breakthroughs. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe. You guys can like this video, obviously, and leave me comments, but definitely follow my content for more on this over the weeks ahead. And I hope you guys enjoyed this webinar, and I'm wishing you a good eclipse season. I will see all of you very soon. Take care.